Chapter 897. The Lee family's many years of savings had almost been emptied by Murong Yu. This made them very angry, aggrieved, and unwilling to accept this. However, a few days later, as more and more news came, the Lee family's hearts gradually calmed down. The Wang family's treasury had almost been emptied. The mysterious dragon sect had been uprooted by Murong Yu. At the same time, all the items in the mysterious dragon sect's treasury had fallen into Murong Yu's hands. Not long after, the forces behind the dozen or so great ancestors who had come to Ascension City that day were all suppressed by Murong Yu. Among them, 3 forces were ruthlessly uprooted by Murong Yu. Not even a chicken or dog was spared. The other forces were slightly better, but their treasury was almost lifted into the air. Apart from the 3 forces that were destroyed by Murong Yu was merciful to the other forces. At least, he left them with 10% of protection. At this point, the grievances and unwillingness in the Lee family's hearts were all gone. They were only glad. They were glad that they did not choose to fight Murong Yu head-on. Otherwise, their family would have ceased to exist on the primordial continent. It was the same for the other families. While they were glad, they were deeply warned, you can offend others in the future, but you must not offend the people from Ascension City. They are all demons, and we can't afford to offend them. If Murong Yu were to find out that the forces they had robbed were so respectful towards them, wouldn't he laugh out loud? Due to Murong Yu's high-profile robbery of the dozen or so heavenly god great ancestors, his name in Ascension City had spread, intimidating many forces on the primordial continent. After all, although the primordial continent was big and there were countless forces. However, there are only a few families with heavenly god-great ancestors overseeing them. Moreover, even a mid-stage heavenly god-great ancestor was not a match for Murong Yu. Who would dare to harbor ill intentions against Ascension City? For a time, Ascension City became a forbidden ground for many forces. They did not dare to offend it. Of course, there are many people who dared to stroke the tiger's whiskers these days. Moreover, there were also many people who did not like Ascension City. It was impossible for the giants of the primordial continent to watch the Ascension City grow stronger. This was because once a force's strength increased too quickly and became a giant, it would create a conflict of interest with them. In fact, Murong Yu's goal had always been the 4 continents. Establishing Shenzhen in Ascension City was only a last resort. He had no interest in the primordial continent at all. After all, the primordial continent was the lowest level continent. Normally, only peak true gods could be found. Even heavenly gods were few and far between. However, even if Murong Yu said it out loud, no one would believe him. Therefore, the magnates of the primordial continent, led by the Lingtian Mansion and the Skywave Mansion, had gathered in Primordial City to discuss how to deal with Murong Yu and suppress Murong Yu. There weren't many forces that were qualified to gather together, only a dozen or so. However, these 10 were the true giants of the primordial wilderness continent. This was because they all had late heavenly gods in their forces. Forces without late heavenly gods could not be called giants. That was because there were no over-gods in the primordial continent. Late-stage heavenly gods were already overlords. If it were up to me, we should just kill Murong Yu and suppress Ascension City. He's just a clown, a late heavenly god said indifferently. The force he was in was called the Wandering Dragon Gang, one of the giants of the primordial continent. I heard that Murong Yu is also a late heavenly god, and he's quite young. I heard that he has no ambition for the primordial continent. He's young and powerful. Would you believe that if I didn't say that he has no ambition? This kind of person is even more ambitious. If we don't stop him, he'll definitely unify the primordial continent. By then, there'll be no place for us. Moreover, this guy has reached late heavenly god at such a young age. His potential is limitless and terrifying. Maybe he'll leave the primordial continent. After all, it's hard to reach a higher level here. His stage is on a higher level continent. No matter what, Ascension City can't become stronger. Otherwise, there'll be no place for us in the primordial continent. The group discussed. Although they had different opinions in the beginning, they eventually came to a united front. They wanted to force Murong out of Ascension City or kill him and destroy Ascension City. It seems quite lively. Everyone, are you guys really discussing how to deal with me? Just as everyone was about to make their move against Murong, an indifferent voice rang out from behind them. Everyone was shocked. Then, they saw a black-clothed young man walking over from afar, as if he was taking a stroll. Almost immediately, he entered the courtyard they were in. They were in a manor in the primordial continent. It was one of the properties of the Ling Tian mansion. Whoosh! After seeing the black-clothed young man, everyone stood up involuntarily. They looked at him with a serious expression. Murong? The person who came was Murong. Murong indifferently swept his gaze across the crowd, then sat down on a chair. Murong, what are you doing here? Leave immediately. Otherwise, don't blame us for being rude. A late-stage heavenly god looked at Murong and said coldly. Just a moment ago, they were still discussing how to deal with Murong. However, Murong's sudden appearance caused them to feel a sense of guilt. What? Weren't you guys discussing how to kill me and suppress Ascension City? Didn't I come here on my own accord? Look, I'm a good person. Murong did not look nervous at all. On the contrary, he looked relaxed. However, his casual attitude was a sign of contempt and disdain for the other big shots. You guys have disappointed me. I've already said that I don't have any ambition for the primordial continent. This place is only a stepping stone for me. You guys are too petty. No wonder you guys can only fight in this small place for your entire life. You guys have no growth and no future. You're just a bunch of trash. Enough. Ling Fan, the ancestor of the Ling Tian mansion, roared at Murong. However, Murong acted as if he did not see or hear anything. If you're not trash, then what are you? I'm sure you all know who I am. A few decades. It's only been a few decades since I ascended from the immortal realm to the god realm. In a few decades, I went from a quasi-god without a quasi-god to a peak heavenly god. Quasi-god, deity, true god, heavenly god. From major realms in a few decades. Let me ask you, is a mere primordial continent worthy of my attention? Originally, I just wanted to settle down in the primordial continent temporarily. However, you short-sighted, ignorant trash wanted to deal with me. Idiotic existences, a bunch of trash. You've disappointed me and angered me at the same time. Do you know what the consequences of angering me are? Perhaps you thought that Li Wenyong and his group of trash must have angered me. However, you're all wrong. Those people did not anger me. Therefore, I magnanimously did not kill them. I only took their quasi-gods and their countless years of savings. When they heard Murong talking to himself, everyone felt a chill run down their spines. If he was already like that when he was not angered, what would he do once he was angered? Are you afraid? Murong sneered, his face full of disdain. From the moment you decided to deal with me, your fate has already come to an end because of your stupidity. Not only that, even the forces behind you have also come to an end. From today onwards, there will no longer be any giants like Lingtian Prefecture or Skywave Prefecture on the primordial continent. The only giant left will be Ascension City. Remember, you forced me to do all of this. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't even be bothered to take half a step out of Ascension City. Ha ha ha! Murong, you finally revealed your wild ambition. What do you mean we forced you to do? If you didn't want to protect the primordial continent in the first place, so what if we forced you? Ling Fan laughed out loud. However, that's just your last thought. Today, you won't be able to walk out of primordial continent. This will be your burial ground. After killing you, everyone in Ascension City will die. Ling Fan shouted angrily as he strode towards Murong. At the same time, the other Divine Realm experts also closed in on Murong. You bunch of trash. You still don't know what's good for you when you're about to die. Today, I'll kill all of you one by one. Murong suddenly disappeared as he spoke. Boom! The moment Murong disappeared, a huge fist came out of the void and landed on Ling Fan's head. A terrifying force exploded. Ling Fan only had time to let out a scream before his head exploded like a rotten watermelon. However, as long as his godhead was still there and his soul was not destroyed, Ling Fan would not die. With a thought, Ling Fan's headless body retreated. At the same time, he was about to gather his divine power to regrow his head. "Die for me," Murongyu shouted as he punched out once more. Bang! Ling Fan's body exploded from Murongyu's punch, turning into a bloody mist that dissipated into the air. Even his soul had been destroyed. In the end, all that was left was a godhead that was emitting a faint glow. Murongyu grabbed it and pulled it over. The first one. After Murongyu killed Ling Fan, who was at the peak of the late heavenly god stage. With 2 punches, he stood on the spot and looked at everyone indifferently. Everyone's hearts were beating wildly. A terrifying emotion quickly spread among them. Too terrifying. Murongyu's strength was too terrifying. He killed Ling Fan with 2 punches. This made them feel incomparable fear. Chapter 898. He's powerful, but he's only one person. We can kill him with so many of us. An ancestor of Skywave Prefecture roared. He suppressed the fear in his heart and charged at Murongyu. At the same time, the others calmed down. They knew they could only live a peaceful life after killing Murongyu together. Otherwise, they would be killed by Murongyu one by one. Immediately, more than a dozen late-stage Divine Realm experts charged at Murongyu at the same time. They wanted to kill Murongyu. Murongyu faced the sky and let out a long howl as he teleported away. His figure flickered as he dodged the incoming attacks. At the same time, he appeared in front of a late-stage Divine Realm Old Ancestor. Boom! Murongyu's 1,000 armies elephant-drawing fist landed on the Hoteon god's body. The terrifying power exploded. The late-stage Divine Realm expert did not even have time to react before he was smashed into a cloud of blood mist. He was killed. This time, Murongyu was really angry. Every time he attacked, he used his strongest attack. Originally, his 3 godheads were all late-stage Divine Realm experts. With the fighting formula, his battle prowess increased tenfold, and his body was at the peak of mid-grade Divine Artifact. Even an early-stage Divine Realm expert would be killed by his punch, let alone these ordinary late-stage Divine Realm experts. Murongyu used the army formula and teleported again and again. These Divine Realm experts could not even touch the corner of his clothes. Every time he appeared, a patriarch would be killed. Bang, bang, bang. In less than half a day, more than half of the ancestors were killed. In the end, only the strongest ancestor of Skywave Prefecture was left. Stop! Murongyu, stop! The ancestor of Skywave Prefecture was terrified. He looked at Murongyu in horror. As I said, when you gather together and decide to kill me, you'll die. You've already lived for another half a day. Murongyu laughed nastily. His figure flashed and disappeared. Bang! When he reappeared, his huge fist struck the ancestor of Skywave Prefecture, shattering him into millions of pieces. More than a dozen patriarchs were killed. Murongyu grabbed the godheads and storage rings, then took a step forward and disappeared from the courtyard. When he reappeared, he was already in the Ling Tian Mansion. In the Ling Tian Mansion, other than the late-stage Heavenly God Ancestor, there were more than a dozen Heavenly God Stage experts. He was extremely powerful. However, now that their ancestors had been killed, they were no longer a concern. Not far ahead, a mid-heavenly god from the Ling Tian Mansion was cultivating. Murongyu snorted coldly, kicked the door to pieces, and walked in. Who is it? The middle-stage heavenly god who was in the midst of cultivation flew into a rage. Without even looking at Murongyu, he threw a punch at him. I'm the one who's going to kill you. Murongyu said indifferently as he threw out a punch as well. Crack! The mid-stage heavenly deity's fist was shattered in a fine powder midway. Then, under his terrified and shocked expression, Murongyu's divine fist bravely continued forward and smashed him to pieces with a single punch. After collecting the godhead and storage ring, Murongyu's figure flickered and disappeared once again. When he reappeared, he was already in the main hall of the Ling Tian Mansion. Here, 5 heavenly gods were waiting anxiously. They were probably waiting for news from their ancestor. Bang! Suddenly, a middle-stage heavenly god who was sitting in the main hall exploded. Immediately, the other 4 people were shocked. However, before they could react, an early-stage heavenly god also exploded. At this moment, Murong Yu's figure appeared in their line of sight. "Who are you?" The remaining 3 were scared silly. Their first reaction wasn't to run away or attack, but to ask who Murong Yu was. "The one who killed you is also the one you want to kill," Murong Yu said indifferently as he attacked again. Rumble, waves of terrifying power burst out. 1 middle-stage heavenly god and 2 early-stage heavenly gods could not do anything to Murong Yu. They were killed by him directly. After killing these people, Murong Yu didn't stop. Instead, he continued to walk towards the location of the heavenly god stage that his divine consciousness had sensed. In less than 2 hours, more than a dozen heavenly gods of the Ling Tian mansion were killed by Murong Yu. In the end, when Murong Yu took away the entire treasury of the Ling Tian mansion, the people in the Ling Tian mansion learned the news. After all the heavenly gods of the Ling Tian mansion were killed, the mansion was in chaos. No one dared to chase after Murong Yu. After leaving the Ling Tian mansion, Murong Yu killed his way into the Skywave Prefecture. The strength of the Skywave Prefecture was similar to that of the Ling Tian mansion, so the number of heavenly gods was almost the same. However, the Skywave Prefecture was also vulnerable. It did not take much time for Murong Yu to kill all the heavenly gods of the Skywave Prefecture. After taking away the treasury of the Skywave Prefecture, Murong Yu left the primitive wasteland city. Murong Yu did not go back to the Ascension City. In addition to the Skywave Prefecture and the Ling Tian mansion, there were more than a dozen forces that wanted to kill him. Murong Yu's next target was these forces. A month later, more than a dozen forces that wanted to kill Murong Yu were all uprooted by Murong Yu. Of course, Murong Yu only killed their heavenly gods and took away their treasures. However, these forces were originally the superpowers of the primitive wasteland continent and had countless enemies. Now that there was no celestial deity realm powerhouse holding down the fort, those enemies of theirs naturally would not be courteous. After Murong Yu killed the heavenly gods of the last force, the other dozen or so forces had also been wiped out by their opponents. Some forces had only retreated in defeat, while others had been completely annihilated. Murong Yu did not care about this at all. Originally, they had minded their own business and would not have been wiped out. However, they wanted to kill him. The fact that Murong Yu hadn't personally killed every single one of them was already quite merciful. At this point, the Ascension City had become the only superpower in the primitive wasteland continent. If Murong Yu wanted to unify the primitive wasteland continent, he would be the overlord of the primitive wasteland continent. However, Murong Yu made it clear that the Ascension City would not rule the primitive wasteland continent and would not provoke others. Of course, if someone provoked the Ascension City, they would have to bear the wrath of the Ascension City. After witnessing Murong Yu's strength and power, who would dare to provoke the Ascension City? After intimidating the entire primitive wasteland continent, Murong Yu finally had some free time. It was worth mentioning that during this process, someone in Shenzhen finally succeeded in condensing a divine lattice and divine body. The speed was as fast as Murong Yu. The first to successfully condense a divine lattice was the fire-eyed golden ape who had obtained the inheritance of the heavenly demon god. After the fire-eyed golden ape, the big black dog also successfully condensed a divine lattice and passed the deity realm. Other than those who had inherited memories, the speed of the others was much slower. However, condensing a divine lattice was only a matter of time. Once he was free, Murong Yu felt that he had nothing to do. I wonder if those people have made a move against the heavenly Tao sect. On this day, this thought suddenly flashed through Murong Yu's mind. Then, his figure flashed and disappeared from the Ascension City. Rumble. As soon as Murong Yu appeared outside the heavenly Tao sect, he heard a series of loud noises coming from the direction of the heavenly Tao sect. At the same time, it was accompanied by a terrifying fluctuation of power. Someone is attacking the heavenly Tao sect. Murong Yu frowned slightly. When he met Tianjizi and obtained the ring of the heavenly Tao sect's sect master, Murong Yu had already regarded the Heavenly Tao sect as his own sect. Now that he saw someone attacking the Heavenly Tao sect, he was naturally unhappy. Thus, he hid his body, spread his angel wings, and flew towards the Heavenly Tao sect. However, he soon stopped. At this time, the Natural Law School, which was originally surrounded by strange peaks and beautiful scenery, had now become a ruin. The ground was dyed red with blood. Corpses were everywhere, and blood flowed like a river. As far as the eye could see, there were only a few people fighting. The Heavenly Tao sect, which originally belonged to the disciples of the Heavenly Tao sect, was now filled with people from other sections. Disciples of the Heavenly Tao sect, how dare you kill the young master of the Divine Union? Your Heavenly Tao sect will be buried with my young master. A cold voice came from afar, frightening the remaining people of the Heavenly Tao sect and infuriating Murong Yu. It is indeed this shameless force. Murong Yu was furious. Back in the Heavenly Chasm, he had not only killed Ji Tianji, but also some primordial gods and heavenly venerables. The forces behind those people had not caused trouble for the Heavenly Tao sect, but the Divine Union, which had only lost a heavenly king, had made a move. It had to be said that the Divine Union was too despicable. Murong Yu has been expelled from the sect by us. He is no longer a disciple of the Heavenly Tao sect. How dare you kill the disciples of the Heavenly Tao sect? This is simply intolerable. The people of the Heavenly Tao sect were furious, and their hatred for Murong Yu was even more intense. They all believed that the fall of the Heavenly Tao sect was completely caused by Murong Yu. Forget it. The Heavenly Tao sect has been destroyed. In the future, I will destroy the Divine Union and avenge all of you. Now let's go and get the treasury of the Heavenly Tao sect. Murong Yu really wanted to kill these people of the Divine Union, but there were definitely heavenly emperors among them. Given his current strength, he was simply no match for them. Therefore, he hid himself and headed toward the treasury in the depths of the Heavenly Tao sect. The treasury of the Heavenly Tao sect was similar to the library. It was a 9-story tower with many restrictions. When Murong Yu flew over, the treasury was already surrounded by some disciples of the Divine Union. However, although the Heavenly Tao sect was not as strong as the Divine Union, it was impossible for them to break the restrictions in a short time. Chapter 899. However, the Heavenly Tao sect was ultimately only a superforce in the Dream Wilderness. They probably didn't even have Heavenly Emperor powerhouses now. Even if they did, they would have been killed long ago. Because in front of the treasure vault, Su Hao saw 5 Heavenly Emperor powerhouses from the Divine Union. Apart from that, there were actually no powerhouses from the Heavenly Tao sect. In fact, Murong Yu estimated that even if the Heavenly Tao sect had Heavenly Emperor powerhouses, there definitely weren't many. It was impossible for them to be a match for the Divine Union. Otherwise, the Heavenly Tao sect wouldn't have been destroyed. At this moment, the 5 Heavenly Emperors of the Divine Union were cracking the restrictions of the treasure vault. I wonder if I can use Hichu Luo Shu to take away the entire treasure vault? However, even if I can, I will expose my identity. I might as well discuss them. In the void, Murong Yu thought for a while. Then, he flapped his angel wings and disappeared from the spot in a flash. Ever since he became stronger and gained a deeper understanding of space rules, these so-called restrictions were completely useless to him. Even if he directly entered the treasure vault, those restrictions didn't discover him at all. Swoosh! Murong Yu appeared on the first level of the treasure vault. The moment it appeared, a surge of divine essence energy that was vast like an ocean pounced overhead on. Su Hao looked over and saw that the first level of the treasure vault had another space. It was an incomparably huge space. In this space, there were mountains of divine crystals that flickered with various colors. The first floor stored divine crystals. The first thing that entered his sight was the mountain-like piles of white divine crystals, which were low-grade divine crystals. Among the low-grade divine crystals, there were orange middle-grade divine crystals. Su Hao's divine will spread out and directly covered the first level of the treasure vault. Then, he discovered that there were the least low-grade divine crystals here, followed by the highest grade saint grade and military grade divine crystals. And the most were actually supreme grade divine crystals. This wasn't hard to understand. After all, there were too few peerless and saint grade divine crystals. Even the Heavenly Tao sect definitely didn't have many. And the reason why there were so few low-grade divine crystals was because there was no need to store them in the treasure vault, at least above 10,000 trillion. Morongyu roughly estimated the number of divine crystals on the first floor, but he didn't get the correct number. However, it didn't matter. He immediately summoned the Hichu Luoshu and expanded it to cover the entire first floor. Swish! Hichu Luoshu released a huge force and sucked in. Instantly, he collected all the divine crystals on this floor into the He2 and the Book of the Luo. He didn't even let go of the divine crystals that had fallen into the corner. He collected all of them without leaving a single one behind. In an instant, the entire first floor became empty. Hee. I wonder what kind of expressions those idiots from the Divine Union will make when they discover that there is nothing after going through so much effort to enter this place. Morongyu sneered as he entered the second floor of the treasury in a flash. In fact, there was a restriction between the first and second floors, but it had no effect on Morongyu. The second level's divine essence was only stronger than the first level's, because what was stored here were divine veins. There were low-grade, middle-grade, high-grade divine veins, and even higher-grade divine veins. Boom! Just as Morongyu was about to take a look at how many divine veins there were, he felt the entire treasury shake violently. Then, he used his spiritual consciousness at the entrance of the first floor to see that the people from the Divine Union had already broken through the restriction and rushed in. Oh no, the restriction on the outermost layer of the treasury is the strongest. As for the restriction between the floors, it can't even withstand a single blow. They will be on the second floor soon. Morongyu's expression changed. He couldn't care less about how many divine veins there were. He immediately summoned the Hichu Luoshu and collected all the divine veins. Then, he took a step forward and rushed into the third floor. What's going on? When the elites from the Divine Union entered the first floor of the treasury, they saw that it was empty. There was nothing left in this empty space. Instantly, all of them were stupefied. Damn it, someone entered the treasury before us. They plundered this place clean before we entered. I believe that bastard has already entered the second floor, or even higher. A heavenly emperor said angrily. He was so angry that smoke was about to come out of his nose. However, how could that person have entered before us? We spent a tremendous amount of effort to break that damned restriction. Could that person have ignored the restriction? Another heavenly emperor looked at the staircase between the first and second floor with murderous intent. The restriction there had not been broken. It could be the remnants of the Heavenly Tao sect. They don't even need to break the restriction to enter and exit. This person must still be in the treasury. Get someone to guard outside. Let's go up and kill that bastard. Immediately, someone sent a message. Suddenly, the treasury was surrounded by countless elites from the Divine Radiance sect. Boom! Under the joint attack of the 5 heavenly emperors, the restriction between the first and second floor was simply unable to withstand a single blow and was directly shattered. Then, the group of them rushed into the second floor. However, other than the remaining divine origin chi, the second floor was the same as the first floor. There was not a single strand of hair left. Bastard, go to the third floor. The elites from the Divine Union were furious. After breaking the restriction between the second and third floors, they appeared on the third floor. However, there was nothing on the third floor. The Divine Union was so angry that their lungs were about to explode. Fourth floor, fifth floor, sixth floor, they rushed up the floors one by one, but they were all empty. At this moment, Morongyu had already arrived on the ninth floor. Different treasures were stored in every level of the treasury. Divine crystals, divine veins, divine materials, and so on. The ninth floor contained the cultivation techniques of the Heavenly Tao sect. There were millions of cultivation techniques. Some of them were books, while others were jade slips. Any cultivation technique that could be stored in the treasury of the Heavenly Tao sect was not trash. These cultivation techniques just happened to solve the cultivation problem of Shenzhen and the rest. In addition to the other resources that he had obtained, Murong had practically emptied the treasury of the Heavenly Tao sect over countless years. It could even be said that the Heavenly Tao sect's countless years of operation had ultimately benefited Murong. Of course, it was a pity for the disciples that had been killed by the Divine Union. Among these cultivation techniques, there should be the Heavenly Tao scripture, right? That old man Tianji's storage ring should have something even more precious, Murong thought to himself. With a wave of his hand, he began to move the millions of cultivation techniques. As Murong was moving all the cultivation techniques, he also heard the people from the Divine Union bombarding the restriction between the 9th and 8th floors. After thinking about it, Murong did not leave the treasury immediately. Instead, he condensed his divine power and left a few words on the 9th floor. Then his figure flashed, and he disappeared from his original spot. Boom! Just as Murong's figure disappeared, the few heavenly emperors of the Divine Union had already rushed over with murderous intent. However, they were only left with Murong's disappearing figure. It was a startling glance. Bastards of the Divine Union, you destroyed the Heavenly Tao sect. Today's enmity will be avenged. That's right, don't even think about the treasury of the Heavenly Tao sect. There won't be a single strand of hair left for you. At the same time, I suggest that you go back and guard your treasury well. When Big Brother is in a good mood, he will visit your treasury. Just as the 5 heavenly emperors were about to burn with anger, the rest of the people from the Divine Union walked over. Then, a heavenly king stage expert suddenly said these words. Damn it, the 5 heavenly emperors were already angry. When they suddenly heard this person's words, one of the heavenly emperors immediately flew into a rage and slapped the heavenly king away. Beaster Star, what did you say? The heavenly emperor glared at the heavenly king with murderous intent. The heavenly king expert looked at the heavenly emperor with an aggrieved expression. I just read out these words. Only then did everyone see the words floating in the void in front of them. It was exactly the same as what the heavenly king had just said. Immediately, apart from the few heavenly emperors, everyone else looked at the heavenly king with sympathy. In fact, apart from the heavenly king, some other people had also seen the words. However, they just didn't read it out. The heavenly king who had been slapped by the heavenly emperor was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. He cursed his bad luck in his heart. However, he could only grit his teeth and swallow it. Could it be that he still wanted the heavenly emperor to apologize to him? Or was there some kind of compensation? If he dared to say that, the heavenly emperor would definitely slap him to death. This bastard should be a remnant of the Heavenly Tao sect. Damn it, he actually tricked us. If I find out who he is, I will definitely torture him to death. A heavenly emperor roared. How did he leave the treasury? One must know that there are restrictions everywhere in the treasury. Furthermore, our people were guarding outside, yet we didn't discover him. Could there be another passage in this treasury? Perhaps it's a teleportation array? A few heavenly emperors looked at each other with ugly expressions. There must be a teleportation array here, and it might even be a one-time use one. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to escape. Yes, it must be so. A few heavenly emperors really didn't know how Murong had left the treasury. In the end, they could only think of this possibility to comfort themselves. In fact, they all knew that it was impossible for a teleportation array to appear in the treasury. Otherwise, if someone came in, wouldn't they be able to let the other party leave easily? However, they didn't dare to believe that someone had emptied the treasury of the Heavenly Tao sect under their noses and then left to ridicule them before leaving. As for whether it was an immemorial god realm or an Empyrean realm expert, they never thought about it at all, because if that person was an immemorial god or an Empyrean, he could kill them with a single slap. It would be bored enough to play with them. Moreover, the person who left the words was obviously a remnant of the Heavenly Tao sect. If the Heavenly Tao sect really had an existence of that level, would it be destroyed by them? Chapter 900. After emptying the treasury of the Tian Dao sect, Murong Yu directly entered the Hichu Luoshu and teleported back to the Ascension City. As a result, the people of the Divine Union who were guarding the treasury naturally did not discover anything. In fact, even if he did not enter the Hichu Luoshu, the people of the Divine Union would not be able to discover him. After all, he was invisible, and even a heavenly emperor would not be able to discover him. Obtaining the treasury of the Tian Dao sect should be able to support the operation of the Shenzhen for a long time. Yes, even if a heavenly king powerhouse appears, there is no need to worry. Of course, this was only Murong Yu's most ideal estimation. If these resources were used on a limited number of people, these people could be nurtured to the heavenly king stage or even the heavenly emperor stage. However, these resources were only enough for a few people to consume. The rest of the people would not be able to enjoy these benefits. Murong Yu cannot do this. What he needed to do was to maintain the operation of the entire Shenzhen. Geniuses among geniuses were people who were worth a lot of resources to nurture. However, ordinary disciples could not be given up either. After all, the people who supported a sect were not just a few exceptional geniuses, but countless ordinary disciples. Otherwise, those forces would only recruit exceptional geniuses. Why would they recruit so many ordinary disciples? Could it be that they were only used as green leaves to set off those exceptional geniuses? After the resources were distributed, the treasury of the Tian Dao sect would not be able to last for long. This was very obvious. Although this was the accumulation of the Tian Dao sect over countless years, it was still operating normally. The Tian Dao sect had already reached a balance of income and expenditure and was even making a profit. However, the current Shenzhen only knew how to consume and not produce. Naturally, it would run out of resources. Should I go to the treasury of the Divine Union and empty it out? Murong Yu suddenly had this thought. Moreover, this thought became more and more intense after it appeared. Murong Yu could not wait to fly over and rob the treasury of the Divine Union. Although no one in the primordial wilderness city dares to touch the Ascension City now, nothing is absolute in this world. Once I leave the primordial wilderness continent, I will need a powerhouse to guard this place. Since that's the case, let's raise Yang Yun and Ling Ling's strength first. As Murong Yu thought about it, he immediately transmitted his divine sense to Yang Yun and Ling Ling soon. I will leave the primordial continent and head to the void continent. On the other hand, Shenzhen needed experts to take care of him. Now, I'll help you increase your strength, at least to the peak heavenly god realm. After the two ladies came over, Murong Yu went straight to the point. Yang Yun nodded with excitement on his face. However, there was no joy on Ling Ling's face. On the contrary, a look of worry flashed across her face. I'll go with you. Ling Ling looked at Murong Yu and suddenly said resolutely. Murong Yu's heart skipped a beat. He naturally knew why Ling Ling was like this. Ling Ling, the seal on your body won't loosen for the time being. It won't be a problem for you to increase your strength at all. You don't have to worry about your body's condition. Even if I go to the Void Continent, as soon as you feel that something is wrong with your body, or when Shenzhen is attacked by a powerful enemy and you can't handle it, just crush the jade slip that I gave you. I'll rush back as soon as I can. Ling Ling still looked worried. The distance between the primordial continent and the primordial continent was extremely far. Even if Murong Yu could sense it after crushing the jade slip, would he be able to return in time? As they did not know about the Hichu Luoshu, the two of them did not really believe it. You have to believe me. Ling Ling, I promise that I'll help you solve your body's problem. I never go back on my words. Murong Yu had no choice but to emphasize again. All right. Finally, Ling Ling agreed. Therefore, Murong Yu waved his hand and put the two ladies into the Hichu Luoshu world. Time can be accelerated here. You can cultivate here. Try to reach the peak heavenly god realm or even the over god realm as soon as possible. The two women's faces were instantly filled with shock. They had never heard of time acceleration. However, no matter how shocked they were, they soon calmed down and began to cultivate. You could directly absorb the power of the divine veins. Don't worry about the lack of divine veins. Yu directly gave the two ladies 100 divine veins each. The power of these divine veins was enough for them to reach the peak of the divine realm. At the same time, Yu began to burn his divine veins to accelerate time. After the two ladies entered the state of cultivation, Yu left the Hichu Luo Shu. Then, he sorted out all the treasures he had obtained from the heavenly Dao sect's treasury and handed them to Zhao Jiqing. For a long time, Yu had directly handed these treasures to Zhao Jiqing for safekeeping. This was a habit, and at the same time, a kind of trust. Of course, it was not that Yu did not trust Yu Mengqing and Mu Liyue. It was just that the two ladies had the same character as Yu. They liked to leave everything to others. Even if Yu handed these treasures to them, they would never agree. When Yu was not in Shenzhen, the one who was in charge of Shenzhen was Zhao Jiqing. She had the ability to do so. Moreover, Zhao Jiqing was in charge of Shenzhen, and the entire Shenzhen people were convinced. This was not because Zhao Jiqing was Yu's wife, nor was it because she was the most beautiful woman in Shenzhen. It was because of her personality and charm. Her charm made everyone in Shenzhen admire her. As for why, Yu didn't know, nor did he know. Anyway, this was a good thing for him. In the following days, Yu did not go anywhere. He taught everyone in Shenzhen, including his children and the disciples of Shenzhen, and spent his days leisurely and carefree. The one worth mentioning was Fan Tong. This guy had a strong background and was very weak. However, his knowledge and insight, especially his experience in cultivation, were very rich. These days, he was treated by Yu as Shenzhen's head instructor. Every day, he would give lectures and improve the strength of Shenzhen people. Moreover, this guy was very interested in this and would never get tired of it. In his own words, when he stood on the rostrum, the way everyone looked up to him made him feel very good. In this regard, Yu was speechless. As long as this guy brought up his old man and his backer, the leaders of countless large forces in the God realm would have to look up to him. This guy was actually looking for such admiration in front of countless quasi-gods in Shenzhen. He had no future and was too useless. In the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed. In the Hichu Luoshu world, time had accelerated, and 10,000 years had passed. With the help of countless herbs and divine pulses, Yang Yun and Ling Ling's strength had reached the peak of the heavenly God realm. They were only one step away from breaking through to the over-God realm. Yu did not ask them to stop cultivating. The two girls were also doing their best to cultivate. During this process, Yu did not cultivate. The power he needed was too terrifying. If he wanted to break through to the over-God realm, he would definitely use up a lot of divine pulses. And the divine pulses he used up could improve the strength of countless people in Shenzhen. Therefore, Yu did not want to waste this power. In any case, he was going to the primeval wilderness continent. When the time came, he would just rob the treasuries of some forces. After another 100 years, as the two of them released powerful auras, they finally reached the over-God realm. They became the most powerful beings in the primeval wilderness continent. Of course, that did not include those freaks in the ghost village. It was worth mentioning that in these 200 years, many people in Shenzhen had successfully condensed a godhead. Zhao Jiqing and the other two girls, Murong Xian and the other three, as well as Zhang Ao and Duan Muqing, had all successfully stepped into the true God realm. Of course, not everyone could successfully enter the true God realm. Although some people had condensed the Godhead, they were unable to pass the God tribulation and were turned into ashes. However, this kind of unlucky person was one in a million. It was because they were too unlucky that they ended up like this. The loss to Shenzhen was not great. Yang Yun, Ling Ling. From now on, all of you must protect Glory's sect well for me. If you find a strong enemy that you can't defeat, don't try to be brave. You must crush the jade slip that I gave you at the first moment. I will rush back as soon as possible. Before leaving, Yu reminded them again. Yang Yun and Ling Ling nodded in agreement. Then, After Murong Yu gave instructions to Zhao, Jiqing, and the rest, he disappeared with Fan Tong. Fan Tong, do you think there are people in the ghost domain? In the Hichu, Luoshu world, Murong Yu asked Fan Tong. All these years, Murong Yu often wanted to return to the ghost village. However, he always felt that the ghost village was extremely mysterious. Although those people were very good to him, Murong Yu did not want to return to the ghost village before he figured them out. In fact, there was another important reason why Murong Yu did not return to the ghost village. That was because the people in the ghost village were too strong. He did not want to go back and look for a blow. Even if a heavenly emperor expert enters the ghost domain, they can't come out. Maybe there are people inside. I'm not very sure. Fan Tong frowned. He did not know much about the ghost domain. Murong Yu nodded. He was a little disappointed. He thought that Fan Tong would know some secrets of the ghost domain. Swish! Near the mysterious Star City, Murong Yu and Fan Tong walked out of the void. Brother, this spatial treasure of yours is really amazing. It actually has a teleportation function. It's even more awesome than those teleportation arrays. After coming out, Fan Tong looked at Murong Yu enviously. Fan Tong's face was filled with envy, but there was no jealousy, let alone greed. It was because of this that Murong Yu dared to expose the Hichu Luoshu's teleportation function to him. Otherwise, he would rather fly over slowly. The only teleportation array to the Great Desolation Continent is in the Dream Desolation City. With that, Fan Tong identified the direction and then flew in the direction of the Dream Desolation City. The reason why he appeared near the Ascension City was because the closest teleportation point between the Hichu Luoshu and the Dream Desolation City was here. There was no other way. Murong Yu had not been to many places. Chapter 901. Dream Wilderness was one of the largest cities in Dream Wilderness, and the only transportation formation connected to Yorwild's continent was located here. With Murong Yu and Fan Tong's strength, it would have been impossible for them to even get close to the formation, much less use it, even if they had enough money to pay for it. However, when Fan Tong revealed a bit of his background, the big shots in charge of the transportation formation were almost scared to death. They'd gone from being lofty existences to being mere sycophants in the blink of an eye. Fan Tong's background was just too frightening. In the end, Murong Yu and Fan Tong didn't have to spend a single crystal to enter the formation. On the contrary, they were gifted with quite a few divine veins. This was the reputation of Fan Tong's father. Murong Yu sighed with emotion. In fact, in the world of immortals, Murong Yu's children would be treated in the same way if they were discovered. Murong Yu didn't have such treatment, but he didn't. He could create such treatment. He wasn't a super second generation, but he could make his descendants become super second generations as well. This was one of Murong Yu's most important pursuits, aside from his pursuit of power. Murong Yu is a good husband, a good father, and a good ancestor. In short, Murong Yu is a very good person. Continents on the level of Dream Wilderness were as numerous as the grains of sand in the Ganges. Therefore, when Murong Yu and Fan Tong walked out of the transportation formation, they didn't appear in a large city on Yorwild's continent. Instead, they appeared in a small city. However, even the smallest city on the Eldritch continent was several times larger than the Dream City. Countless experts came and went there. In fact, Fan Tong told Murong Yu that the city lord of this small city was a celestial emperor. On Yorwild's continent, celestial gods were forefathers and could do whatever they wanted. In the Dream Wilderness continent, heavenly emperors were also overlords, ruling over countless large regions. However, in the Eldritch continent, a heavenly emperor was only the city lord of a small city. It was not that a heavenly emperor was too weak, but in the Eldritch continent, there were too many heavenly emperors. Even though the prehistoric continent was incomparably vast, it still resulted in a situation where there were too many monks and not enough gruel. Of course, it didn't mean that a brick on the street could knock down a large group of celestial emperors. Instead, it was like the domain of some demonic beasts. Every demonic beast had its own domain. It was the same in the primordial continent. Every force had their own territory. For example, the city called Mysterious Moon City in front of them was actually a subordinate city of a certain great power. In the prehistoric continent, the hard currency is still divine crystals and divine meridians. However, in terms of divine crystals, they were at least high-grade divine crystals. Mid- and low-grade divine crystals are too worthless. They are too embarrassed to take them out, Fan Tong explained. Murong Yu revealed a helpless expression. He didn't even have a few divine crystals, let alone divine veins. This was because he didn't bring anything with him when he came out. Under normal circumstances, even if he had divine veins or something like that, it would be useless. As for Fan Tong, Murong Yu didn't even need to ask to know that he didn't have anything. Immediately, the two of them looked at each other with a worried expression. Those bastards only gave us a few dozen low-grade divine veins. They are too stingy. The next time we go back to the Dream Continent, we'll just empty their treasury, Fan Tong suddenly cursed. Murong Yu rolled his eyes. Fan Tong was really a weirdo. People gave him gifts, but he thought it was too little. Those divine veins aren't enough for us to teleport a few times. We can only slowly think of a way, Fan Tong said with a depressed expression. Isn't the Ouyang clan nearby? Didn't you say that the Ouyang clan's relationship with your clan was all right? Why don't we go to the Ouyang clan to take a look? Murong Yu suddenly said. That's not good, right? Fan Tong's eyes flickered, and the expression on his face became even more depressed and awkward. On the way here, Murong Yu found out that Fan Tong was actually related to the Ouyang clan. After Murong Yu's investigation, he finally found out a shocking piece of news. Fan Tong was engaged to a woman from the Ouyang clan. However, Murong Yu didn't know what was going on. Every time they talked about Fan Tong's fiancée, Fan Tong's words were evasive and he didn't want to talk about it. This made Murong Yu secretly guess. Could it be that the woman from the Ouyang clan was as ugly as a dinosaur? Or a tigress? Or was there some other reason? In the end, Murong Yu accidentally found out why Fan Tong appeared in the Dream Continent. This guy actually refused to marry the woman from the Ouyang clan. In the end, his father was furious and slapped him to the Dream Continent. At the same time, he took away all the good things on Fan Tong's body. Furthermore, his father said that Fan Tong could only return home when he was willing to marry. Otherwise, he would never be able to return to the Fan clan. In the end, Murong Yu came to a conclusion. The father and son of the Fan clan were strange existences. The sisters from the Fan clan are actually quite good-looking. I'm willing to go to the Ouyang clan to take a look. Murong Yu chuckled. Let's go to the Divine Union. Fan Tong glared fiercely at Murong Yu and took the lead. The Divine Union is too far from Mysterious Moon City. Our holy range isn't enough for teleportation. If we fly there at our speed, it will take a long time. Let's think of a way to get some holy range first. Murong Yu chased after him and said, in fact, with his speed that was comparable to the Heavenly Emperor realm, it was considered fast in the prehistoric continent. It was just that Fan Tong's speed was too horrible to look at. If they wanted to take Fan Tong into the Hichu, Luoshu world and let Murong Yu take him away, Fan Tong would definitely not be willing. Why don't we empty the treasury of the new Moon City Lord? Fan Tong stopped and looked at Murong Yu with a smile. How dare you? You even dare to touch the treasury of the city Lord's mansion. Do you want to die? Before Murong Yu could answer, a murderous voice rang in their ears. Murong Yu and Fan Tong were shocked. They instantly raised their strength to the limit and turned their heads to look at the source of the voice. An 18 or 19-year-old youth with delicate features and skin as fair as mutton fat was standing not far from Murong Yu and Jian Wuxuan. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the two of them with a murderous aura. The other party's strength was not very strong. He was only in the heavenly god realm. Immediately, Murong Yu and Fan Tong let out a sigh of relief. After all, this kind of thing made them feel guilty. The two looked at each other first. Then Fan Tong glared at the youth and said fiercely, "Little girl, go away." The youth, or rather, the young girl was furious. She put her hands on her hips and glared at Fantong with her phoenix eyes. She said unhappily, "Brat, are you blind? How does this young master look like a woman?" Moronyu could not help but laugh. "Little girl, your disguise is too bad. As long as one's eyes are not blind, one can see that you are a woman." In fact, Moronyu had gone a little overboard. Although the young girl's disguise was not very good, it was not something that everyone could see through. Unfortunately, Moronyu and Fantong were not ordinary people. They could see through her disguise at a glance. "Yes, your eyes must be blind. Otherwise, why would you think this young master is a woman?" The young girl suddenly laughed. Her words made Moronyu and Fantong not know whether to laugh or cry. "Go away." Fantong waved his hand and was about to leave. "Humph. I just heard you say that you were going to empty the treasury of the city lord's mansion. If you dare to leave, I will immediately report you. When the time comes, you will end up very miserable." Moronyu felt a little helpless. Of course, they were not afraid of this girl. Even if she did report them, they did not do anything. What could the city lord do to them? Moronyu was sure that in the ancient continent, the number of people who dared to touch Fantong could be counted on one hand. And those people would definitely not appear in such a remote place like Strange Moon City. However, if you agree to one of my conditions, I can consider not reporting you. What condition? Moronyu was not in a hurry anyway, so he took the opportunity to ask. The young girl looked at Moronyu and Fantong, and finally said something that made Moronyu and Fantong vomit blood. "As long as you bring me along when you take action. Little girl, we are both good youths. We will not do such things," Moronyu said with a serious face. At the same time, he added in his heart, "Even if we do it, we will not bring you along." After saying that, Moronyu and Fantong turned and left. The young girl angrily looked at Moronyu and Fantong's backs for a while, and then she chased after them. Thus, Moronyu and Fantong were in front, and the young girl was behind them. When they left, the young girl also left. When they stopped, the young girl also stopped. "Aya, it's dark. Let's find an inn to sleep in," Moronyu suddenly said, and then turned to look at the young girl. "Little girl, do you want to sleep together?" The young girl was shocked, and her face turned red. Then she glared fiercely at Moronyu and said angrily, "You two big perverts, who wants to sleep with you? You just said that you're not a girl, and I suddenly feel that I have a good impression of you. Why don't we have a long talk tonight?" Moronyu took a few steps forward and put his hand on the young girl's shoulder. The young girl was stunned. Then she suddenly retreated. "I suddenly remembered that I have something to do, so I will leave first. You two sleep." Seeing the young girl leave, the smile on Morongyu's face disappeared. He turned to Fantong and asked, "What do you think? Although that girl's cultivation is not high, she is definitely a descendant of a big family. She has an expert secretly protecting her. Damn it, my old man is too heartless. Isn't it just rejecting the marriage? He slapped me to the dream wilderness continent, and he didn't even send an expert to protect me. He could have just casually sent a sky venerable to protect me," Fantong said, and then couldn't help but curse his old man. On the other hand, Moronyu staggered. Chapter 902. Kurlan stood at the corner of the street and watched as Moronyu and Fantong walked into an inn. She snorted coldly and said, "You two brats. Humph. One day, I will teach you a lesson." Looking at Lon Kier's angry look, the old man and the young man behind her revealed an unrecognizable smile on their faces. As members of the Lon family and Kurlan's bodyguards, the two of them were well aware of Kurlan's unruly character. Furthermore, Kurlan had never been at a disadvantage, not even verbally. However, after encountering Moronyu and Fantong today, not only had her disguise been seen through, but she had also been so frightened that she had fled back. It was really amazing. "Miss, do you want me to kill those two brats?" the young man asked in a low voice as he took a step forward and suppressed the smile on his face. Kurlan shook her head hurriedly. "No, I want to settle this score with them personally." "Humph. Let's stay in that inn as well." Kurlan gritted her teeth and walked towards the inn where Moronyu and Fantong were staying. In the inn, Morongyu was consulting Fan Tong. What level of power is the Divine Union in the Eldritch Continent? What about the Heavenly Punisher Palace, Devil Sect, Immortal Palace, and so on? Fan Tong was born in a big power, so he had an unimaginable understanding of the Eldritch Continent. He said without hesitation, the Divine Union also has heavenly venerate powerhouses. It can be considered a superpower in the Eldritch Continent. However, there is still a big gap between it and some Overlord-level powers. As for the Heavenly Punisher Palace, it is many times stronger than the Divine Union. It is an Overlord-level power in the Eldritch Continent. On the contrary, the Immortal Palace and Devil Sect are about the same as the Divine Union. In the Divine World, these superpowers are as numerous as the grains of sand in the Ganges River. Morongyu nodded his head, but he was speechless in his heart. These were all his enemies, and all of them were so strong. It was really incredible. Fan Tong suddenly reacted. He looked at Morongyu and asked, "Oh, right. Many great powers have their own orthodoxies in the immortal plane. Didn't you know that you destroyed the orthodoxies of the Heavenly Punisher Palace and the others?" Morongyu nodded his head and spoke bluntly, without hiding anything. The Immortal Palace, Devil Sect, and Sacred Sect. The Heavenly Punisher Palace has a terrifying background. It is an Overlord-level power in the Eldritch Continent. Even other Overlord-class forces wouldn't dare to offend the Heavenly Punisher Palace. Morongyu lightly nodded his head. He naturally knew how frightening the Heavenly Punisher Palace was. However, strictly speaking, the palace was actually his, because he had the Heavenly Punisher token. However, if Morongyu were to run to the Heavenly Punishing Palace, take out the Heavenly Punishing Medallion, and announce that the Heavenly Punishing Palace now belonged to him, Morongyu would definitely be slapped to death by the disciples of the Heavenly Punishing Palace and snatch the medallion. The Heavenly Punisher Palace has branches in many cities in the Eldritch Continent. I think Mysterious Moon City should have one too. Why don't we pay a visit to their treasury? Fan Tong's eyes lit up. Good idea. Morongyu immediately made his decision. After that, they left the inn and started to wander aimlessly around Strange Moon City. Actually, they were observing the terrain. Not long after, they found the Heavenly Punisher Palace's branch in Mysterious Moon City. Powerful auras came from inside. There should be many Heavenly King Realm experts. A branch of this level shouldn't have anything good in their treasury, but it's better than nothing. Morongyu was disappointed to find that there were no experts in the Heavenly Punisher Palace. That night, Morongyu sent Fan Tong into the world of He Tu and Luo Shu. Then, with a flash of his body, he teleported to a small alley near the Heavenly Punisher Palace's branch. After appearing, Morongyu turned invisible and quietly entered the Heavenly Punisher Palace's branch. The strongest in the Heavenly Punisher Palace's branch was only at the Heavenly King realm. It was impossible for experts of this level to discover the invisible Morongyu. Therefore, Morongyu swaggered into their treasury. This Heavenly Punisher Palace's branch is too poor. There's nothing from before. Seeing that there were only a few trillion high-quality divine crystals, a pitiful amount of top-quality divine crystals, and tens of thousands of low-quality divine veins in the treasury, Fan Tong was disappointed. No matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. Morongyu didn't reject anything that came his way. With a wave of his hand, he stored everything in the treasury into the He Tu and Luo Shu worlds, regardless of what it was. Too ruthless, but I like it. Fan Tong laughed loudly. Then, he and Morongyu entered the He Tu Luo Shu world and left the treasury. From the beginning to the end, the people of the Heavenly Punisher Palace didn't know that their treasury had been emptied. Unless someone entered the treasury, no one would find out. Bang, bang, bang. Just as Morongyu and Fan Tong appeared in the inn's room, the door was slammed so hard that it seemed like it was about to explode. Immediately, Morongyu and Fan Tong were startled. They thought that the people of the Heavenly Punisher Palace had come to kill them. However, after scanning with their divine senses, they looked at each other and smiled. "Little girl, Are you here to serve me? Murong-yu opened the door and looked at Kurlan, who was dressed in men's clothes, with a smile on his face. Bah! Kurlan glared at Murong-yu. In her heart, she wanted to punch and kick Murong-yu. She wanted to beat his handsome face into a pig's head. You must have gained a lot, right? Kurlan glared at Murong-yu and then directly entered Murong-yu's room. However, her words caused Murong-yu and Li Qiye to jump in laughter. Little girl, what did you gain? Fan Tong stared at Kurlan, without blushing or skipping a beat, playing dumb. Humph. Don't think that I don't know what you're doing. I've been knocking on the door for a long time. If you didn't sneak out to do something shady, then... At this point, Lan Qier's face turned red. Her gaze kept darting back and forth between Murong-yu and Fan Tong. The meaning behind her words was self-evident. This handsome guy only likes beautiful women. Little girl, although your appearance is a bit ordinary, it's not that bad. Are you automatically delivering yourself to my door to serve me? Do you fancy this handsome guy or my brother? After knowing that Kurlan didn't know that the two of them went to the Heavenly Penalty Palace's treasury, Fan Tong immediately teased. Little boy, if you dare to say this again, do you believe that I won't castrate you? Let you become a eunuch forever? Kurlan was furious. Her pair of beautiful eyes emitted a strong, murderous aura as she looked at Fan Tong's crotch. In an instant, Fan Tong felt that his crotch was cold. Then the three of them were stunned. Murong-yu and Fan Tong looked at each other. They felt that Kurlan was really powerful. Lan Qier's pretty face was flushed red from embarrassment. She was also stunned by her sudden toughness. For a moment, everyone was silent. The atmosphere fell into a strange silence. After a long time, Murong-yu helplessly said to Kurlan, Little girl, you didn't come here in the middle of the night just to castrate Fan Tong, right? Fan Tong? Kurlan was suddenly stunned. Then, she pointed at Fan Tong with a look of disbelief and asked, You said he is called Rice Bucket? You are that Rice Bucket from the Fan family? This time, it was Murong-yu's turn to be depressed. Fan Tong seemed to be very famous. How could anyone who came here know him? Do I know you? Fan Tong also looked at Kurlan with some depression. Ha ha! Kurlan suddenly laughed. In the end, she put her hands on her hips and laughed toward the sky. That attitude of hers made Murong-yu and Li Wuyo feel so ashamed that they couldn't even show their faces. Miss Lady. When Kurlan put her hands on her hips and laughed towards the sky, she suddenly heard the voice of her old bodyguard, Lan Hong. Feeling that she had lost her composure, Kurlan's laughter was instantly extinguished. Her hands were also put down from her waist. Fan Tong, the third young master of the Fan family. He was engaged to the flower of the Ouyang family, Ouyang Fei. But the night before the wedding, he suddenly regretted it. In the end, his father was furious and was almost slapped to death. In the end, he was sent to the Dream Wasteland. Why did you come back to the Great Wasteland? That's not right. The intelligence said that you were with that homicidal maniac Murong-yu, and that your relationship was very close. Could it be that you are that homicidal maniac Murong-yu? Kurlan suddenly turned around and looked at Murong-yu with a face of shock. At the same time, two faintly discernible spiritual senses instantly locked onto Murong-yu. Obviously, it was Kurlan's two bodyguards. Once Murong-yu showed the slightest bit of murderous intent, those two would definitely kill Murong-yu at the first moment. Murong-yu frowned slightly. He hated this kind of situation the most in his life. However, the mist was by his side. As bodyguards, they should be like this. Therefore, Murong-yu only frowned slightly and did not act out. That's not right. Wasn't Murong-yu killed in the Heavenly Chasm? How could you still be here? You shouldn't be Murong-yu. Who are you? When Murong-yu was thinking about how to arrange an identity for himself, Kurlan had already denied Murong-yu's true identity. This let him breathe a sigh of relief. I am Zhao Yimou, Murong-yu said faintly. You are really not Murong-yu. Kurlan looked at Murong-yu with disappointment on her face. However, she quickly reacted. You are all friends of the homicidal maniac Murong-yu, right? You should be very clear about what happened to Murong-yu in the Heavenly Chasm, right? Do you want to tell me? Not interested. Morong Yu and Fan Tong said in unison. Then, Fan Tong frowned and looked at Kurlan. Who are you? Why do you know me? Do you know about me? Who doesn't know about you? Lon Kier glanced at Fan Tong. You're famous in certain circles, but you're not. Rice Bucket. Right. Let me introduce myself. My name is Kurlan, a member of the Lon family. I don't know you. Morong Yu and Fan Tong said in unison again. It was just that Morong Yu really didn't know her. However, although Fan Tong didn't know Kurlan, he knew the existence of the Lon family. Chapter 903. Little girl, if there's nothing else, go back and wash up before you sleep. Don't tell me you really want to stay here and serve me? Fan Tong rolled his eyes and chased the shocked Kurlan away. Idiot, you actually don't recognize me. You're really pissing me off. Kurlan suddenly flipped out and looked at Fan Tong angrily. Fan Tong and Morong Yu looked at each other, not knowing why Kurlan suddenly went crazy. It's fine if Zhao Yumu doesn't recognize me, but you actually said you don't know me as well. How preposterous. Oomph. I originally had something good to share with you, but I'll forget about it now. Kurlan glared fiercely at Fan Tong and Morong Yu, then turned to leave. What good news? Hearing that there was good news, Fan Tong's eyes immediately lit up and stopped Kurlan. Sister, I don't want to tell you. Kurlan looked angry. Then you can go back. Fan Tong turned sideways and gestured for Kurlan to leave. Kurlan coldly snorted and strode out. However, she quickly returned. All right, there's no harm in telling you. The holy saliva fruit will appear soon. I passed by this place because of the holy saliva fruit. Holy saliva fruit? Is it really the holy saliva fruit? Fan Tong's eyes shone brightly, a look of greed on his face. This was the first time Morong Yu saw greed on Fan Tong's face. That's right. It's said that it'll appear soon. Are you guys interested in going together? Kurlan frowned and said. Of course, we're interested. Where is it? Fan Tong immediately asked. I'm not telling you. You just have to come with me tomorrow. Kurlan coldly snorted. Then, like a proud phoenix, she raised her proud head and left their room. Fan Tong, what is this saint saliva fruit? You actually put on such an appearance? Morong Yu couldn't help asking after Lon Kier left. The holy saliva fruit, as its name suggests, is a holy fruit born from the saliva of a saint. It's the most delicious holy fruit in the divine realm, second to none. Fan Tong said with glowing eyes. A holy fruit born from the saliva of a saint? Doesn't that mean we have to eat other people's saliva? Morong Yu's face was filled with astonishment. At the same time, he felt disgusted. Fan Tong immediately looked at Morong Yu with disdain. Brother, I told you that you're inexperienced, but I don't blame you. But as you know, even a mouthful of our saliva can make a mortal ascend and become an immortal. Even to immortals, our saliva is a great supplement. Morong Yu nodded. Gods and immortals were not on the same level. In front of gods, immortals were just mortals. Moreover, a god's physical body and everything on it contained the god's understanding of the laws. Everything contained an extremely large amount of energy. If an immortal obtained a mouthful of saliva from a god, as long as he refined it, he could greatly increase his cultivation and realm, and even his understanding of the laws. A god's saliva could be treated as a treasure by an immortal. Do you know what saint is? It's like the difference between gods and immortals. However, the difference between a saint and a god is even greater than the difference between a god and an immortal. A saint is an unparalleled expert who has surpassed the heavenly venerate realm. Legend has it that only by reaching the saint realm can one truly live as long as the heavens and earth and be immortal. In front of a saint, whether it's a god or an immortal, they are all ant-like existences. However, a god is just a slightly bigger ant. Thump! Morong Yu's heart twitched violently. He had always thought that the heavenly venerate realm was the pinnacle of cultivation, the end of cultivation. However, there were still saints above the heavenly venerate realm. Then all of this would be easy to explain. Why did Hichu not tell Morong Yu about Zhao Yun's enemy for so long? Murong Yu had originally thought that Zhao Yun's enemy was some kind of major power. Now, it seemed that Zhao Yun's enemy was not a god, but a saint. Moreover, it was very likely that he was a peak existence among saints. Such a supreme existence was not something that Murong Yu could know. If he knew, perhaps those high and mighty saints would sense it and blow a breath from far away in space and time, blowing Murong Yu to smithereens. The saliva of a saint is a treasure that even heavenly venerate realm experts dream of, because it contains the power of a saint, the control and understanding of power of a saint. As for the saint saliva fruit, legend has it that it is a strange fruit that grows after absorbing the saliva of a saint. It will only appear in the world when it is ripe, and the time is extremely short. The strangest thing is that the saint saliva fruit will appear in different places every time. After a short period of time, regardless of whether the saint saliva fruit has been plucked by someone, it will disappear immediately. Even heavenly venerate realm experts are unable to restrain it. However, when the saint saliva fruit is about to ripen, it will constantly emit a unique fragrance that attracts people. It is also because of this that people know about the saint saliva fruit's appearance. Otherwise, no one would know where the saint saliva fruit will appear. Other than being the most delicious saint fruit in the god realm, the saint saliva fruit also contains a trace of the saint's understanding of the world and a trace of the saint's power. These are things that even heavenly venerates dream of. Therefore, when the saint saliva fruit appears this time, many immortal venerates will definitely come. However, no matter how Fantong exaggerated how delicious the saint saliva fruit was and what heaven-defying effects it had, Murong Yu felt a little disgusted. He did not have the habit of eating other people's saliva. However, if the saint saliva fruit really had such heaven-defying effects, Murong Yu could not let it go for nothing. With invisibility, teleportation, and Hichu Luo Shu, even if he was in the hands of a group of heavenly venerate realm experts, Murong Yu was confident that he could get a share of the loot. The next day, without waiting for Kurlan to come find them, Fantong had already dragged Murong Yu to Kurlan's room excitedly to wait. However, Kurlan's speed could be said to be extremely slow. Perhaps this was a common problem for women. Murong Yu and Fantong stared outside her room for a long time before Kurlan slowly walked out. When Kurlan appeared in front of them, Murong Yu and Fantong's eyes instantly lit up. At this time, Kurlan had already changed back to women's clothing. She was wearing a pale yellow long dress. Her skin was creamy, and she had a face that could captivate birds and beasts. It could be said that she was an outstanding beauty. Moreover, Kurlan's entire body emitted the aura of a noble family's young lady. A faint smile hung on her face from beginning to end. She was youthful and incomparably pure. However, Murong Yu and Fantong were only surprised for a moment. Thinking of Kurlan's appearance last night with her hands on her hips and laughing at the sky, they definitely would not be deceived by Kurlan's seemingly pure appearance again. Seeing Murong Yu and Fantong's stunned appearance, Kurlan was extremely pleased in her heart. After all, her looks could be considered an outstanding beauty. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was unmatched in her generation. However, which man who had seen her true appearance had not been mesmerized by her? Very quickly, Kurlan noticed that the stunned look on Murong Yu and Fantong's faces had disappeared. They had instantly returned to their usual calm. Kurlan was instantly displeased. She then smiled and walked in front of Murong Yu and Fantong. With a pure smile on her face, she asked, "Am I beautiful?" If it had been anyone else, perhaps they would have been completely mesmerized by Kurlan's smile. However, Murong Yu and Fantong were not fond of women's charms. Furthermore, after witnessing Kurlan's true appearance, they were basically immune to Kurlan's pure appearance. "Ha ha!" Fantong did not speak. Instead, he suddenly put his hands on his hips and laughed into the sky. That posture was exactly the same as when Kurlan had laughed into the sky last night. The only difference was that it was a different person. Murong Yu pointed at Fantong and said expressionlessly, Your appearance last night has left a deep impression on us." Kurlan was instantly stunned. She then glared at Murong Yu and Fan Tong, her eyes spitting fire. She gritted her teeth and said, "Would kill you to forget what happened last night." However, her heart was filled with tears. "My image has been ruined. My apologies were all God's." "We all have a photographic memory," Fan Tong replied calmly. "All right, your appearance is indeed not bad. You're an outstanding beauty. You can mesmerize people who don't know your true appearance." "Umph." Kurlan snorted coldly in annoyance and left the tavern first. Soon after, Murong Yu and the other two also followed. As for Kurlan's two bodyguards, they were hidden in the shadows. "Zhao Yumu, am I beautiful? How about I become your wife?" Kurlan was fuming. She walked in front of Murong Yu and Fan Tong like a proud phoenix, not saying a word. After walking like this for half a day, Kurlan suddenly stopped. She turned to look at Murong Yu and asked with a smile that could topple cities, "Oft." Murong Yu spat out the water he drank last night. Fan Tong and Kurlan's two bodyguards also staggered and almost fell to the ground. "What? Isn't it good to have such a beautiful woman as your wife?" Kurlan still had a smile on her face. Coupled with her pure appearance, it was needless to say how tempting she was. "Ha ha ha." Murong Yu didn't speak, but Fan Tong couldn't help but laugh. "Rice Bucket, what are you laughing at? I'm not going to be your wife." Kurlan glared at him angrily. "My brother has 3 wives. None of them are inferior to you in terms of appearance. Moreover, his first wife is 10 times more beautiful than you. No, it should be 100 times more beautiful." Kurlan was stunned for a moment. She then pointed at Murong Yu with a look of disdain. "You big pervert." However, she turned to look at Fan Tong. "Are his wives really that beautiful? That's impossible. None of them are inferior to you. Moreover, you really aren't as beautiful as his first wife. So, you'd better save it and stop trying to seduce him. He's not interested in you." Fan Tong chuckled. In fact, Fan Tong wasn't exaggerating. Zhao Jiqing and the other two were not inferior to Kurlan in terms of appearance. Moreover, Zhao Jiqing was indeed more beautiful than Kurlan. Chapter 904. Zhao Yumu, are your wives really prettier than me? This shouldn't be true, right? How can your wives be prettier than me? Can you bring me to meet them? Along the way, Kurlan kept circling around Murong Yu, asking this question over and over again, making Murong Yu and Fan Tong both toothache endlessly. However, Murong Yu did not answer a single one of her questions. Even if he answered these questions, who knew what other questions Kurlan would have? On the contrary, in this process, Murong Yu got Fan Tong to talk about his fiancée from her mouth, whom Fan Tong had always been unwilling to talk about. Ouyang Fei, the #1 person in the Ouyang family's younger generation, an existence at the level of a peerless genius. About the same age as Fan Tong, and she was also not inferior to Kurlan. But her strength was much stronger than Fan Tong. It was said that she had already reached the late stage of the Heavenly Emperor realm. In fact, it was said that Ouyang Fei's strength had already broken through to the immemorial God realm. She had a beauty that could cause the downfall of a city and a strength close to the peak of the divine realm. Coupled with Ouyang Fei's terrifying background, Murong Yu believed that Ouyang Fei was the dream lover of countless men in the divine realm. Countless men wanted to marry Ouyang Fei back home. Speaking without any exaggeration, if Ouyang Fei said that she wanted to choose a husband, then the people who applied could probably line up from the Great Desolate Continent to the Dream Desolate Continent. However, Murong Yu understood why Fan Tong rejected the marriage. The Fan family was even a bit stronger than the Ouyang family. It was precisely because of this colossus that the Ouyang family did not dare to do anything to Fan Tong, even if the marriage was rejected. Otherwise, would Fan Tong dare to reject the marriage? The two of them could be said to be well matched in terms of social status. However, Fan Tong was only in the heavenly deity realm. In fact, not long ago, Fan Tong was only in the true God realm, as a man, only in the true God realm. And marrying an immemorial god realm powerhouse as his wife, although both of them were ranked at the second level of the realm pyramid. However, Ouyang Fei was on the second floor, while Fan Tong was on the second last floor. It was easy to imagine the pressure. Or perhaps, many people thought that marrying such a strong person as their wife was definitely a good thing. However, any man would more or less be a male chauvinist. If the difference in strength wasn't too big, then it wouldn't matter. However, the gap between them was too big. Fan Tong couldn't even lift his head in front of Ouyang Fei. Therefore, even after they were married, their lives would not be happy. "Brother, my condolences." Murong Yu patted Fan Tong's shoulder and said. Fan Tong immediately glared at Murong Yu. "What are you mourning for? It's not like anyone died." However, Murong Yu saw a trace of loneliness in Fan Tong's eyes. Presumably, he also liked Ouyang Fei. However, Fan Tong's father was truly a weirdo. They would focus on nurturing the children of ordinary clans. They would desperately pile all kinds of treasures on them. However, Fan Tong's father never gave him special treatment. In fact, Fan Tong's two older brothers were the same. Fan Tong's father was the same. Their family needed to grow up like ordinary people. Only in this way could they have greater achievements. Of course, if they couldn't break through and their lifespan ran out and died, then so be it. Regarding this, Murong Yu admired the people of the Fan clan. If it were him, he definitely wouldn't be able to do this. Didn't you see that Murong Yu often gave special treatment to his 4 children? Kurlan looked at Fan Tong with disdain. "Rice bucket, you're too useless. Are you afraid to marry Sister Ouyang Fei? Little brat, don't be nosy." Fan Tong waved his hand. "How am I small?" Kurlan puffed up her chest and looked at Fan Tong angrily. "And it's not small." Fan Tong stared at her chest and nodded slightly. Kurlan instantly retreated. Tianbao City was a small city like Mysterious Moon City. However, Tianbao City was many times more lively than Mysterious Moon City. Walking on the streets, one would often see experts coming and going. In the Mysterious Moon City, one could occasionally see Heavenly Monarch and Heavenly King Realm experts on the streets. In the Heavenly Protection City, there were a lot of Heavenly King Realm experts, and even Heavenly Emperor Realm experts would occasionally flash by. This was because of the Saint Saliva fruit, which attracted many people from nearby. However, the Great Wasteland continent was simply too big. The disappearance of the Saint Saliva fruit's appearance had not yet spread. In the Great Wasteland continent, there were very few people. If it wasn't a big matter, the speed at which it spread was not fast. Even so, the experts in the surrounding area rushed over one after another. Of course, those experts below the Heavenly Emperor realm were just there to watch. It was impossible for them to obtain the Saint Saliva fruit. They were just there to join in the fun. In fact, when Murong Yu approached Tianbao City, he'd already caught a whiff of the faint fragrance in the air. This fragrance was indeed very tempting. However, when he thought about how the Saint Saliva fruit was nurtured by the saliva of a saint, Murong Yu had no appetite at all. Although the entire Tianbao City and the surrounding areas were filled with the fragrance of the Saint Saliva fruit, the fragrance was erratic. However, the fragrance was erratic, and it was impossible to determine the location of the Saint Saliva fruit. This was because the appearance of the Saint Saliva fruit was random. We can only wait in Tianbao City. With so many people, I'm afraid we won't even have a place to stay. Fan Tong frowned slightly. Then what are we waiting for? Let's find him first. Hee. Kurlan glared at Fan Tong. She seemed to dislike Fan Tong very much. Immediately, the group walked towards the inn. Sister Ouyang. Suddenly, Kurlan, who was walking in front, exclaimed. Then, she turned into a ray of light and flew forward. Thump! In an instant, Murong Yu and Fan Tong's hearts twitched violently. Fan Tong's heart twitched because he was worried that they would meet Ouyang Fei. There were many people in the realm of the gods with the surname Ouyang. However, there were probably not many people who could be called sister by Kurlan. Ouyang Fei was definitely one of them. Murong Yu, on the other hand, was afraid of meeting the Ouyang sisters. Of course, He was not afraid of them. However, if he met them, the fact that Murong Yu was still alive would be exposed. Murong Yu's heart skipped a beat. His body flashed, and he was about to escape. However, at this moment, 3 gazes pierced through space and shot towards Murong Yu's face. Murong Yu's figure came to a halt as a bitter smile appeared on his face. "Sisters, what's wrong?" After Kurlan flew in front of Ouyang Yin and the other 2, she did not see the smiles that Ouyang Yin and Tong Tong usually had when they met. On the contrary, she realized that Ouyang Yin, Ouyang Tong, and even the old man beside them were looking behind her with shocked and strange expressions. Following their gazes, Kurlan immediately discovered Murong Yu. However, she thought that old man Pei and the other 2 were looking at Fan Tong. "That Fan Tong, sisters, do you want to capture him?" Kurlan said with a smile. "Kuer, how did you get together with that guy?" Ouyang Tong asked somewhat urgently. "We accidentally met in mysterious Moon City." Fan Tong is the young master of the Fan family. At that time, this guy even wanted to steal something from the mysterious Moon City, Lord's treasury. "Kuer, we're not talking about Fan Tong. We're talking about another person. It's that Murong Yu." "What Murong Yu? What? You're saying that big pervert is that homicidal maniac?" Kurlan was instantly stunned. Then, she fiercely turned her head to look at Murong Yu and Ouyang Tong, who were striding over. She said with a murderous aura, "Big pervert, homicidal maniac, why did you lie to me?" Who knew that Murong Yu would directly ignore her and look at Old Man Pei and the Ouyang sisters? He smiled and said, "Old Man Pei, 2 beauties, long time no see. Brat, you really didn't die?" "Haha, I knew it." Old Man Pei laughed, not caring about his image. On the contrary, the Ouyang sisters looked at Murong Yu in shock, almost touching him with their hands. At that time, they had personally seen Murong Yu being destroyed by the tribulation lightning. Not even a trace of him was left. "Old Man Pei, you call yourself a godly doctor. How can you curse someone to death when you meet them? You don't have the heart of a doctor at all." Murong Yu glared at Old Man Pei and said, "Fan Tong greets divine Dr. Pei." Fan Tong bowed respectfully to Old Man Pei, which was rare for him to be so formal. "Good brat, you have a bright future." "Ha!" Godly Dr. Pei patted Fan Tong's shoulder and laughed loudly. Fan Tong, on the other hand, had an awkward expression on his face as he greeted the Ouyang sisters. Ouyang Tong and Ouyang Tong did not blame Fan Tong. On the contrary, the 2 of them kept sizing up Murong Yu with curiosity. "Big pervert, homicidal maniac, you haven't answered my question." Kurlan saw that everyone was ignoring her, and she put her hands on her waist to make her presence known. When did he become a pervert? Did he molest you?" Ouyang Tong pulled Kurlan over and asked with a smile. Kurlan's charming face turned red. Fan Tong interrupted and said, "This little brat did say that she wanted to be Murong Yu's wife. It's a pity that Murong Yu's wives are all prettier than her. Good for nothing." "Shut up." Kurlan's face turned red. She was only joking when she said those words to tease Murong Yu. Now that Fan Tong said that, she felt that she was a little. "Big Miss Lan, you were the one who denied my identity. Even if I said that I was Murong Yu, you wouldn't believe me, right?" Murong Yu said with a smile. Kurlan was stunned. That seemed to be the case. However, she was still a little unhappy. She felt that Murong Yu had lied to her. "All right, let's go to the restaurant first. Brat, this old man still has something to ask you." Old Man Pei said, and walked towards the restaurant behind him. Big pervert, homicidal maniac, I will settle your debt with you later." After saying that, Kurlan raised her arrogant head and walked into the restaurant like a proud phoenix. Chapter 905. In the restaurant, everyone was eating and drinking as they chatted and laughed. Other than Murong Yu, Fan Tong and Kurlan were a little reserved. After all, Old Man Pei was a renowned miracle doctor in the divine world. Even the experts of the older generation had to be respectful to him, let alone them. In fact, Fan Tong and Murong Yu had the same personality. However, Since Old Man Pei was acquainted with his father, he could only be respectful to him. During the meal, Old Man Pei asked about Murong-yu. Murong-yu could only smile and gloss over it casually. After all, it wasn't appropriate for too many people to know that he had Hichu Luo Shu. Stingy, Kurlon glared at Murong-yu and said in disdain. She was very interested in how Murong-yu had survived the terrifying heavenly tribulation. However, Murong-yu had always avoided the important matters. Or rather, he'd simply let her have her way, which made her extremely displeased. All right, Old Man Pei, didn't you say that you were going to the Ouyang clan? Why did you run out again? Murong-yu didn't believe that Old Man Pei and the Ouyang sisters had rushed back from the toxic continent at such a speed. Sigh, don't mention it. As the saying goes, people make mistakes and horses stumble. This old man has embarrassed himself this time. Old Man Pei said helplessly. What happened? Murong-yu asked in surprise. At the same time, he looked at the Ouyang sisters. He knew that this matter might have something to do with the Ouyang clan. Old Man Pei has a strange illness. Previously, we had invited many miracle doctors to no avail. This time, Miracle Dr. Pei is also helpless. Ouyang Yin sighed and said, the news of Old Man Pei's illness had spread throughout the divine world. Even the Ouyang clan had issued a reward for finding a miracle doctor. Therefore, Ouyang Yin didn't hide this matter from Old Man Pei. After all, Murong-yu only needed to ask around a little to find out. Old Man Pei, didn't you say that your medical skills are amazing? What exactly happened? Murong-yu looked at Old Man Pei in shock. Although he often expressed his disdain for Old Man Pei's medical skills, he knew that Old Man Pei was a genius. However, he also knew that Old Man Pei's medical skills were not just for show. There's nothing wrong with the old man's health. However, his strength continued to decline. It was as if it had been devoured by something. Even with the old man's strength, he could not detect it. Even divine Dr. Pei and the rest can't tell anything. Ouyang Tong said, is he poisoned? Murong-yu frowned slightly. If he wasn't poisoned, then there must be a powerful life form sealed in the old man's body, and that life form was devouring the old man's power to strengthen itself. However, if he were to devour, he would only be able to devour power. He would not be able to weaken or even destroy a person's realm. Then, it was very likely that he had been poisoned. I might have been poisoned, but I can't tell, Old Man Pei said unhappily. A cold light flashed across Murong-yu's brows. He had encountered such a situation before. Back in the immortal world, wasn't Old Man Shangguan in the same situation? However, if Old Man Ouyang was really poisoned, then the poison must be very scary. After all, if even Old Man Pei could not tell, then it must be very scary. A doctor was not only proficient in medical skills, but also in the art of poison. After the matter of the Saint Saliva Fruit, I'll make a trip to the Ouyang family. If Old Man Ouyang is really poisoned, I might have a solution. Murong-yu's indifferent words were like a tossed stone that caused 10,000 ripples. His words instantly stunned everyone around him. Pervert, murderous demon. Are you saying that you're a divine doctor? A divine doctor who is even more brilliant than divine, Dr. Pei? Kurlon immediately expressed her disdain for Murong-yu. Fantong looked at Murong-yu in shock. He did not know that Murong-yu was also proficient in medical skills. The Ouyang sisters were also shocked. Like Kurlon, they were filled with disbelief. Only Old Man Pei's eyes were flickering. No one knew what he was thinking. Old Man Pei was different from the Ouyang family, Fantong, and the rest. He knew that Murong-yu had 3 godheads. Furthermore, Murong-yu had managed to survive the apocalyptic heavenly tribulation and even increased his strength. He couldn't see through Murong-yu at all. Now that he heard Murong-yu's words, a thought appeared in Old Man Pei's mind. He chose to believe in Murong-yu. All right, after this matter, I'll bring you to the Ouyang family. Old Man Pei made his decision. He did not even wait for the Ouyang sisters to question him. The Ouyang sisters looked at each other. They did not believe Murong-yu's words. However, since Old Man Pei had made his decision, they did not say anything else. Pervert, murderous demon, are you trying to build a good relationship with the Ouyang family? Hee hee. Lon Kier glared at Murong-yu with her beautiful eyes and looked at him with disdain. The Ouyang sisters also looked at Murong-yu. Their eyes flickered. Obviously, they had the same idea as Kurlon. Murong-yu glared at Kurlon. Then he pointed at Old Man Pei and Fan Tong and said slowly, "I have these two powerful backers. Who in the god world would dare to touch me?" The three girls fell silent. With the relationship between Fan Tong and Murong-yu, Fan Tong would definitely support Murong-yu. On the other hand, there was a high chance that the Fan family would support Murong-yu. As for Old Man Pei, he had wanted to take Murong-yu as his disciple long ago in the Toxic Continent. He would definitely protect Murong-yu. In this way, Murong-yu's backers were unbelievably powerful. Brother, do you really have medical skills? Don't make the world laugh at you. Fan Tong knew that Murong-yu wasn't the kind of person who would look for backers. He only looked at Murong-yu with suspicion. If Murong-yu was just boasting, he would be laughed at by the world. Didn't I tell you that I was the #1 genius doctor in the immortal world? Murong-yu looked at Fan Tong and suddenly laughed. The first reason he went to the Ouyang family was because of the Ouyang family's old man. He wanted to see if his life force could detect it. The second reason was also because of Fan Tong. He could see that Fan Tong liked Ouyang Fei. However, the difference in strength between the two was too big. Fan Tong couldn't bear it. Actually, these are all psychological problems. Murong-yu wanted to help Fan Tong overcome this psychological barrier. As they spoke, a phenomenon that was countless times stronger than before suddenly assaulted their nostrils. Moreover, the fragrance was getting stronger and stronger. The holy saliva fruit is about to appear. Immediately, everyone stood up abruptly and soared into the air, flying towards the direction of the strange fragrance. Old Man Pei was just about to lift Murong-yu and Fan Tong up and rush to the location of the holy saliva fruit as fast as he could. However, at that moment, he saw a pair of flawless white wings appear on Murong-yu's body. They emitted a faint, supreme aura. Murong-yu grabbed Fan Tong, who was still in a daze. Then he flapped his angelic wings and teleported with a whoosh. Murong-yu and Fan Tong disappeared from the sight of Old Man Pei and the others. Seeing Murong-yu's frightening speed, Old Man Pei, the Ouyang sisters, and the others all had expressions of shock and disbelief. As for Kurlon, she was so angry that she didn't know what to say. This kid really has more and more secrets. Old Man Pei didn't hesitate any longer. He also disappeared from Tianbao City. Following which, the Ouyang sisters and Kurlon also flew towards the direction of the holy saliva fruit with the help of her two bodyguards. Brother, your speed, isn't it too scary? Even divine Dr. Pei was left behind by you. On the way, Fan Tong looked at Murong-yu in shock. One had to know that Murong-yu was in the same realm as him. They were both heaven gods. However, the difference in speed was like heaven and earth. The difference was too big. It can only be for a short period of time. If I were to fly for a long period of time, I wouldn't be able to reach such a speed. Murong-yu explained. This was because he couldn't use instant shift for a long period of time. That would consume too much energy. If you were to teleport over a long period of time, it would be even more unbelievable. Fan Tong rolled his eyes. He was shocked. However, he really liked Murong-yu. After all, the more techniques Murong-yu had, the stronger he was, the stronger his ability to protect himself. He didn't want to see Murong-yu being chased to death. Murong-yu's speed was extremely fast. In an instant, he had traversed more than 1,000,000,000,000 miles. However, the holy saliva fruit was too far away from Tianbao City. After a long time, Murong-yu and Old Man Pei stopped in the void. At that moment, they came to a small hill. The hillside had already been surrounded by countless people, both inside and outside. Moreover, there were many experts flying over from all directions. On top of a small hill, an ordinary-looking tree that was about the height of a human stood there quietly, swaying in the wind. At a glance, the small tree was filled with green and white fruits the size of a fist. There was a dense fog An intoxicating fragrance was coming from these fruits. These ordinary-looking fruits were the legendary holy saliva fruit. They were fruits nurtured by the sage's saliva. At this moment, no one dared to go near the hillside. All of them were staring at the saint's saliva fruits with greedy looks on their faces. The holy saliva fruit wasn't fully ripe yet. Before that, it wouldn't have any effect even if one ate it. Moreover, the taste was still a little unripe. It couldn't be compared to a ripe, holy saliva fruit. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. More and more people were attracted by the fragrance. At a glance, there were already hundreds of millions of people nearby. Moreover, all of them were very powerful. Cultivators at Murongyu's level could be counted on one hand. After all, if they weren't brought over by experts, they wouldn't be able to get close in a short period of time. The people who appeared here now were the people who were originally in the vicinity. However, these weak people were like a lone boat in a stormy sea in front of those experts who were emitting terrifying auras. They could be torn apart at any time. Those experts only needed to release a little bit of their aura to kill them. Therefore, they kept retreating. They were destined to be bystanders. Chapter 906. Murongyu and Fantong, on the other hand, were two special cases. They stood motionless in front of the small hill like two sacred mountains. However, the surrounding experts only glanced at them and did not do anything. After all, no one thought that two sky gods could snatch the holy saliva fruits from them. Perverted murderer! How can you be so fast? At that moment, Old Man Pei and the rest finally arrived. As Murongyu and Fantong were really like cranes in a flock of chickens, they found them effortlessly. Kurlon immediately criticized Murongyu. From the looks of it, she could not wait to beat Murongyu up. Murongyu only glanced at Kurlon indifferently, then looked at the holy saliva fruits on the hill. At that moment, half of the holy saliva fruits had turned white. As long as all of them turned white, the holy saliva fruits would be considered fully ripe. At that time, it would be time for everyone to show their abilities. I didn't expect to attract so many experts. I'm afraid we won't be able to get anything this time, Ouyang Yin said regretfully. Both of them were heavenly emperors, but there were a large group of heavenly emperors nearby, and there was no lack of primordial god realm experts. There were even many heavenly venerate experts. Only heavenly venerate experts were qualified to fight for the holy saliva fruits. The others were just bystanders. They did not even have the right to fight for it. Is there any way? Fantong elbowed Murong and asked in a low voice. Murong did not say anything. He just looked at the holy saliva fruits quietly. Fantong's words attracted the attention of some of the people around him. However, when the crowd saw that it was only two sky gods, they could not help but want to laugh out loud. In front of so many super experts, two sky gods asked if there was any way to get the holy saliva fruits. Were these two fellows here to be funny? Not to mention them. Even the Ouyang sisters wouldn't believe it. Kurlon glared at Murongyu with disdain. He clearly felt that Murongyu was spouting nonsense. In fact, Murongyu did not even say anything, let alone that he was confident in obtaining the holy saliva fruit. It was simply an unexpected disaster. Only Old Man Pei looked at Murongyu with sparkling eyes. He felt that Murongyu was becoming more and more mysterious. If Murongyu said that he could snatch these holy saliva fruits, he would choose to believe him. At this moment, a crazy idea flashed through Murongyu's mind. He was calculating his chances of snatching some holy saliva fruits. At this point, 2/3 of the holy saliva fruit had turned white. It was about to fully mature. Each and every one of them had already raised their strength to the limit, and a great battle was about to break out. Suddenly, at this moment, Murongyu moved. He walked into the crowd with obscure footwork. Then his body swayed. Following that, Kurlon and the others could no longer see Murongyu. Old Man Pei's eyes flashed. He looked in the direction that Murongyu had disappeared in and seemed to understand something. Murongyu first turned invisible. After turning invisible, he immediately entered the Hichu Luoshu world. Then, he controlled the Hichu Luoshu to turn into an invisible particle and slowly floated above the holy saliva fruit. Murong-yu dared to guarantee that he was the only person so close to the holy saliva fruit. At this moment, Murong-yu's appetite was greatly stimulated by the rich fragrance of the holy saliva fruit. The nausea that came from the saliva of a sage disappeared. This was because the holy saliva fruit was simply too tempting. In the Hichu Luoshu, Murong-yu observed the holy saliva fruit as he conversed with Hichu. Hichu, are you confident that you can keep this holy saliva fruit in the Hichu Luoshu world? This tree is very strange. I'm not confident, Hichu said in a low voice. Then, let's keep the holy saliva fruit first. If possible, let's keep this tree too, Murong-yu replied in his mind. Then, he looked at the holy saliva fruit tensely. Only 1/10 of the holy saliva fruit had not turned white. At this moment, the auras of countless experts outside the small hill were constantly exploding, pushing away the weaker experts. It was a critical moment. Swords were drawn and bows were on the verge of breaking out. At this moment, the Hichu Luoshu had already opened up and covered the entire holy saliva fruit. Suddenly, a strange fragrance that was 1,000 times stronger than before was emitted from the holy saliva fruit tree. At this moment, everyone saw that the holy saliva fruit had completely ripened and turned into white fruits. Rumble. At this moment, the terrifying auras of countless experts exploded and soared into the sky. It was as if they could destroy heaven and earth. It was like a raging torrent or a stormy sea. Immediately, countless people dashed toward the saint saliva fruit. The moment the holy saliva fruit was fully ripe, Murong-yu also moved. Seal. Space imprisonment. Space barrier. Murong-yu roared in his mind. Suddenly, the entire Hichu Luoshu enveloped the holy saliva fruit. The moment it was enveloped, an extremely terrifying suction force erupted from the Hichu Luoshu and acted on the entire holy saliva fruit. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Immediately, the ripened holy saliva fruits flew into the Hichu Luoshu and fell into a jade bottle that had been prepared beforehand. In less than an instant, more than 100 holy saliva fruits had flown into the Hichu Luoshu world. They were all obtained by Murong-yu. At this moment, Murong-yu was already the biggest winner and could leave this place. However, Murong-yu did not leave. Although the holy saliva fruit was a great harvest, Murong-yu still wanted to take the holy saliva fruit tree. Therefore, when he took the holy saliva fruit tree, Murong-yu controlled the Hichu Luoshu to envelop the holy saliva fruit tree. At the same time, Murong-yu used all of his combat skills that had the ability to restrain the holy saliva fruit tree. Whoosh! Originally, the holy saliva fruit tree would automatically leave after all the holy saliva fruits were taken away. However, it was immediately restrained by Murong-yu. At the same time, Murong-yu reached out a large hand, grabbed the holy saliva fruit tree, and pulled it out forcefully. Rustle. The holy saliva fruit tree that no one had been able to leave behind for countless years was now uprooted by Murong-yu. Whoosh! After the holy saliva fruit tree was uprooted, Murong-yu kept it in the Hichu Luoshu world. Then, he directly teleported away from this place. Rumble. It was only after Murong-yu left that the surrounding people finally reacted. In an instant, a terrifying force bombarded the small hill and instantly flattened it. However, there was no trace of Murong-yu. Countless people were stunned when they saw this scene. Who was this person? How could he snatch food from the tiger's mouth in front of countless experts and then leave so casually? He did not even expose himself. What disgusted them the most was that the other party's speed was simply too fast. It was so fast that the surrounding experts could not react in time. By the time they reacted, the person had already disappeared. How similar is this to the scene of the poison dragon king's corpse being taken away from the toxic continent? Suddenly, someone exclaimed, as if recalling the scene of the poison dragon king being taken away from the toxic continent. That time, it was almost exactly the same as the current scene. Could it be that it was done by the same person? Who was this person? How could he be so terrifying? His ability to conceal himself was even more terrifying. If this person was a killer, an assassin, then it would be incredible. Although there were many experts in the realm of the gods who could guarantee that they could block this person's assassination. For a moment, there were people who were angry and people who were disappointed. There were also people who were gloating. What's going on? What happened? At this moment, Morongyu walked over to Fantong and the rest and asked in confusion. Old Man Pei looked deeply at Morongyu and said meaningfully. Morongyu's heart skipped a beat. This old man couldn't have discovered something, right? Other than Old Man Pei, Fantong also seemed to have thought of something and looked deeply at Morongyu, but did not say anything. He knew that someone would continue to speak. As expected, seeing that Morongyu had returned, Kurlon could not wait to describe the scene just now with a face full of excitement. It was as if the person who snatched the holy saliva fruit was him. I see. Morongyu's face was very cooperative and revealed an extremely shocked expression, as well as a trace of regret. Regretfully, he did not see the scene just now and did not see the expressions of those people just now. Let's return to Tianbao City first. Seeing that the holy saliva fruit had been snatched away, many people had already left. Morongyu and the rest also turn around. At this moment, in the Hichu Luoshu world, one of Morongyu's divine consciousnesses transformed into his original body. He was standing in front of an ordinary-looking tree that was about the height of a person and constantly sizing it up. This tree was the holy saliva fruit tree. However, without the holy saliva fruit, Morongyu felt that this was an extremely ordinary tree no matter how he looked at it. Because it was indeed so, he did not find anything strange about it. However, when Morongyu calmed down, he sensed a mysterious aura coming from the tree. It was as if he had gained some sort of enlightenment. Hichu, this tree won't escape here, right? Morongyu asked Hichu, who was beside him. Once it enters the Hichu Luoshu world, it will definitely not be able to leave. From now on, it can only obediently stay in the Hichu Luoshu world. However, young master, you've picked up a treasure this time. Hichu's face revealed a satisfied smile. Are you referring to this tree? Morongyu pointed at the holy saliva fruit tree and asked. Hichu nodded slightly and said, this tree is definitely not as simple as being nurtured by the sage's saliva. It has some of the sage's insights. If you cultivate under this tree, not only can you achieve twice the results with half the effort, you can also comprehend the sage's insights in advance. Chapter 907. What was a sage? A powerful existence that was above the gods. Even a sage's saliva would cause the strongest heavenly venerables in the realm of the gods to scramble for the holy saliva fruit. If one could comprehend a sage's understanding, it would be like an immortal comprehending a god's understanding of the realm, power, and laws. It would allow one to achieve twice the results with half the effort and even double the power. Morongyu was overjoyed. His greatest gain this time wasn't the 100 over holy saliva fruits. After all, the holy saliva fruit was a one-time consumable. If the holy saliva fruit tree continued to exist, Morongyu or others could comprehend things that gods couldn't. That was the most precious thing. Moreover, the holy saliva fruit tree could continue to produce more holy saliva fruits. However, although Morongyu was secretly delighted, he remained calm on the surface. He didn't mind sharing the celestial fruit with Old Man Pei, the Ouyang sisters, and even Kurlon. However, that would expose his trump card. They might even suspect that he had something to do with the Poison Dragon King's incident. These people weren't bad people. Morongyu believed that they wouldn't spread the news. However, there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall. If the news were to leak, it would be a disaster for Murongyu. Therefore, he didn't want to share the holy saliva fruit with everyone for the time being. After a while, everyone returned to Sky Protection City. At this moment, Kurlan was depressed. She had heard of the holy saliva fruit. She had seen and smelled its unforgettable fragrance. However, she didn't have a chance to taste it. That was why she was depressed. On the other hand, Fantong, who had tasted the holy saliva fruit before, wasn't so depressed. After all, he knew that he was probably just a bystander this time. Sister Yin, are we going back to the Ouyang family now? Kurlan hugged Ouyang Yin's arm and looked up at her. Kurlan wasn't short, but Ouyang Yin was taller. Her figure was even more voluptuous than Kurlan's. Ouyang Yin didn't reply immediately. Instead, she looked at Old Man Pei and Murongyu. This time, they had followed Old Man Pei out mainly because Old Man Pei wanted to find a legendary divine material in the divine world. Old Man Pei also suspected that Old Master Ouyang was poisoned, but he couldn't tell. He wanted to find the divine material to expel the poison. However, it was obvious that Old Man Pei had never seen that divine material before. Old Man Pei didn't say anything. Although Murongyu said that he wanted to go to the Ouyang family, he couldn't decide for him when to go to the Ouyang family. Therefore, he looked at Murongyu. Let's go now. Murongyu nodded and said faintly, well, I still have something to do. I won't be going, Fantong said hesitantly. Murongyu wanted to go to the Ouyang family to solve Old Master Ouyang's problem. The most important thing was Fantong's problem. If the person in question didn't go, how could he go alone? Murongyu immediately said, Fantong, since you can't go back to the Fan family now, it's meaningless to be alone in the Eldritch continent. Why don't you come with me? Fantong shook his head. If it was another family, he wouldn't hesitate at all. However, he was really unwilling to go to the Ouyang family. Rice Bucket, are you afraid of meeting Big Sister Ouyang Fei? I know you're feeling guilty. You don't even dare to meet Big Sister Ouyang Fei. Kurlan looked at Fantong with disdain. Fantong's eyes darkened. A beautiful figure involuntarily appeared in his mind. Brother, don't be despised by a little girl. If you don't go, even I will despise you. Murongyu patted Fantong's shoulder. All right. Fantong agreed in the end. It was unknown whether it was because he didn't want to be despised by Murongyu or because he thought of that beautiful figure. The Ouyang family was one of the major forces in the Eldritch continent. It was located in the center of the Eldritch continent in the Tianyang region. In fact, the entire Tianyang region was the Ouyang family's territory. However, the real Ouyang family was in the Tianyang region. The Ouyang family wasn't very big. It was only the size of the primordial city in the Eldritch continent. However, those who were qualified to stay in the Ouyang family were all core disciples of the Ouyang family. The non-core disciples of the Ouyang family weren't qualified to stay in the Ouyang family. They could only be scattered throughout the Tianyang region. Therefore, the entire Tianyang region was considered the Ouyang family. At this moment, on a peak behind the Ouyang family's mountain, a woman in white was sitting cross-legged on the ground, facing the rising sun as she cultivated. The mountain breeze blew, blowing the hair that was scattered on her face, revealing a devastatingly beautiful face. She was the number one person among the younger generation of the Ouyang family, Fantong's fiancée, Ouyang Fei, who was rumored to have reached the immemorial god realm. The immemorial god realm was only one level away from the peak of the divine world, the heavenly venerate realm. In fact, there were many outstanding disciples among the younger generation of the Ouyang family. For example, Ouyang Tong and Ouyang Yin. However, although they were both from the younger generation, there was a huge gap in their age. One should know that the age of the people in the divine world was no longer measured in years, tens of thousands of years, or billions of years, but epochs. 1 trillion years was an epoch. As for the younger generation, those who were within 100 epochs were considered the younger generation. Therefore, those who were within 100 epochs were considered the younger generation. Those who were within an epoch, or even less than an epoch, were considered the younger generation. One could tell at a glance who was more talented and outstanding between the heavenly emperor of 100 epochs and the heavenly emperor of a single epoch. Ouyang Fei belonged to the category of geniuses who were less than 100 million epochs. After a while, Ouyang Fei opened her eyes and stopped cultivating. At this moment, a young girl who looked to be about 16 or 17 years old jumped up and came to Ouyang Fei's side. "Sister Xiao Fei, are you thinking about Fantong again?" The young girl was called Ouyang He. Although she looked to be about 16 or 17 years old, her temperament was about the same. However, she had actually lived for many years. There was no other way. In the divine world, age was calculated using epochs. Those who were less than an epoch were considered little brats. As for Ouyang He, she knew about the matter between Ouyang Fei and Fantong. Ouyang Fei grinned at Ouyang He. Fantong's handsome face with a lazy smile appeared in her mind. Then she suddenly sighed. Hee, Sister Xiao Fei is indeed thinking about that big bad guy. Xiao He has news about that big bad guy now. I wonder if Sister Xiao Fei is interested to know. What news? Ouyang Fei turned to look at Xiao He. There was a trace of anticipation in her eyes. Sister Yin and the others sent back news that Fantong will be coming back with them this time. He will be coming to the family soon. Ouyang He said with a smile. Really? Ouyang Fei was startled and quickly asked. Absolutely. Ouyang He patted her swollen chest and replied. At this moment, Murong Yu and the others had already entered the Tianyang region. They were close to the Tianyang region, the core of the Ouyang family. Along the way, Murong Yu continuously educated Fantong. At this moment, Fantong was no longer nervous. On the contrary, his face was filled with anticipation. Murong Yu knew that the barrier in Fantong's heart had begun to loosen. As for whether it could be broken, Murong Yu could no longer help. It could only depend on Fantong. The group entered the Ouyang family. Murong Yu had already known that Fantong and the others were coming back. Along the way, he met many people. However, the situation was somewhat different from what Murong Yu had imagined. Logically speaking, Fantong's strength was relatively useless and could be classified as trash. Such a trash was the fiancé of the Ouyang family's #1 youth. The Ouyang family members, especially some of the men, should be very angry and hate Fantong. However, Murong Yu realized that although some people were looking at Fantong unkindly, however, no one dared to come and cause trouble. They were not afraid of Old Man Pei or Ouyang Yin, but no one dared to provoke Fantong. Not long after, Murong Yu finally understood the reason for this. At the beginning, when Fantong stepped into the Ouyang family, there were indeed many people who did not like him. There were also many who wanted to cause trouble for him. However, the people of the Fan family were too awesome. The first time, Fantong's second brother killed his way into the Ouyang family and beat up all the people who had caused trouble for Fantong. They were beaten up until they could not get out of bed for thousands of years. She had just woken up and could get out of bed. Fantong's eldest brother killed his way into the Ouyang family again. They were beaten up again. They were beaten up again until they could not get out of bed for thousands of years. This made the Ouyang family members want to cry, but have no tears. In the end, Fantong's father was even more ruthless. He almost killed all the people who had been beaten up by Fantong's eldest brother and second brother. If not for the older generation of the Ouyang family stepping in, those people would have been killed by Fantong's father. However, Fantong's father's anger could not be quelled. He ruthlessly beat those people up until they could not get out of bed for tens of thousands of years. From then on, everyone in the realm of the gods knew that the people of the Fan family did not play by the rules. They were very protective of their own. If Fantong was bullied, the entire Fan family would take action. No matter what the reason was, they would beat you up first. However, in the Fan family, other than Fantong, the rest of the people had abnormal strength. Therefore, the Fan family became one of the most powerful forces in the realm of the gods that could not be provoked. Wherever Fantong went, no one would cause trouble for him. Therefore, when Fantong entered the Ouyang family again, Although there were some people who stared at him with unkind eyes, they did not dare to say a word. They did not even dare to get close to Fantong. Who knew if Fantong's father would jump out again and destroy him? After that, when Murong Yu found out about the glorious deeds of the Fan family's father, he could not wait to fly to the Fan family to meet this legendary figure. Chapter 908. After entering the Fan residence, Murong Yu and Fan Tong were arranged to stay in the guest room. After all, other than Fan Tong, Murong Yu was ordinary. Moreover, Old Man Pei was the same as them. On the second day after arriving at the Ouyang residence, Murong Yu finally looked for Fan Tong helplessly. Fan Tong, you really don't plan to see your fiancée? After this guy came to the Fan residence, he became taciturn. Murong Yu was anxious for him. I don't know if she will blame me. Fan Tong didn't answer. He looked hesitant. Murong Yu was about to faint. He quickly said, if you want to know if she will blame you, just go and ask. You don't even dare to see her. How do you know what she's thinking right now? However, no matter how hard Murong Yu talked, Fan Tong still couldn't make up his mind. In the end, Murong Yu was so angry that he wanted to slap him unconscious and then carry him to see Ouyang Fei. Murong Yu. At this moment, Ouyang Yan's voice came from outside. Murong Yu glared at Fan Tong, then left the room. Murong Yu, the old man has agreed to see you. Come with me. Ouyang Yan looked at Murong Yu in surprise. What kind of existence was the old man? He was one of the top powerhouses in the God realm. For such a person, the old man wouldn't even choose to meet an ordinary heavenly venerable powerhouse, let alone a heavenly god. And Murong Yu was only a heavenly god. Although Murong Yu said that there was a possibility of curing the old man, he was still a heavenly god. It was just that he was only in the heavenly deity realm. Could he really treat it? Ouyang Yan expressed her doubts. The old man shouldn't have believed it, but now it seemed that the old man had reached the point of turning to any doctor in a desperate situation. In reality, the reason why the old man had agreed to meet Murong Yu wasn't because he was desperate and desperate. There was a very important reason. Old Man Pei. After arriving at the Ouyang residence, Old Man Pei disappeared in front of Murong Yu and the others. He must have praised Murong Yu greatly. Ouyang Yan, can you think of a way to let Fan Tong and Ouyang Fei meet? Murong Yu suddenly asked on the way. Yes, but what about Fan Tong's side? Ouyang Yan frowned slightly as she looked at Murong Yu. That guy probably feels that he should be ashamed to meet Ouyang Fei, so he doesn't dare to meet her. This problem should be solved after they meet. All right, leave this matter to me. Ouyang Yan immediately made a decision. Soon, Murong Yu arrived at the depths of the Ouyang residence under Ouyang Yan's lead. Everywhere they passed, Murong Yu could feel a strong aura hidden in the surroundings. Some were the hidden guards of the Ouyang family, while some were the core members of the Ouyang family. This was the core of the Ouyang family. Only the most important people or people with high status were qualified to stay here. For example, Old Master Ouyang and Ouyang Fei were at the same level. After a while, Murong Yu and Ouyang Yan arrived at the deepest part of the Ouyang residence, in front of a huge manor. Before they even got close, Murong Yu could already hear laughter coming from the front. One was naturally Old Man Pei, while the other must be the top member of the Ouyang family, the Old Man Ouyang. Old Man, I've brought Murong Yu. Ouyang Yang reported respectfully as soon as he arrived outside the manor. Although Murong Yu wanted to see the old man's face, he didn't dare to use his divine thought. It was a very rude act to release divine sense in someone else's home. Come in, all of you. That clear voice came out. Then, Ouyang Yin led Murong Yu into the courtyard. Murong Yu was stunned when he looked around. After entering the door, there was a huge garden-like existence. A table was placed not far from the door. There were two people sitting on both sides of the table. One was Old Man Pei, while the other was an ordinary middle-aged man who couldn't be more ordinary. Old Man. Ouyang Yin bowed respectfully to the middle-aged man. Ha ha, young man, do you think that I'm very different from what you imagined? Seeing Murong Yu's shocked expression, the middle-aged man, who was Old Man Ouyang, laughed loudly. He didn't have the aura of a superior, nor did he have the aura of an expert. Instead, he was as amiable as an uncle next door. Murong nodded and came to his senses. He cupped his fists and bowed slightly. As for Old Man Pei treated him like air and ignored him. After getting to know Ouyang Yin and the others, Murong heard them talking about Old Man Ouyang many times. At that time, Murong naturally imagined Old Man Ouyang's appearance. Old Man Ouyang should be a tall, powerful, and dignified old man. He was sure that Old Man Ouyang looked like an old man, but he didn't expect the real Old Man Ouyang in front of him to look so ordinary. "Young man, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and come over." Old Man Pei glared at Murong. Murong smiled embarrassedly, then walked over and sat down on the other chair beside the table. Ouyang Yin rolled her eyes. She didn't know why Murong, who was only a heavenly god, was so calm. He dared to sit down beside Old Man Ouyang and Old Man Ouyang without batting an eyelid. If it was her, she definitely wouldn't dare to sit down. In fact, she wasn't the only one who didn't dare to sit down. In the realm of the gods, other than those who were of the same generation as Old Man Ouyang or those who were extremely confident, no one else dared to sit down. However, Murong wasn't an ordinary person. Whether it was in the cultivation world or the immortal world, he was the lord of a realm and held a high position. Even now that he was in the realm of the gods, those people with extremely high statuses couldn't use their superior aura to oppress him. Moreover, Murong was confident. Currently, his strength wasn't as strong as Old Man Ouyang and the others, but he would soon catch up and even surpass them. Since that was the case, why should he be afraid of them? "Young man, you're not bad. You're brave." Old Man Ouyang nodded when he saw Murong's calmness. There was no lack of admiration in his eyes. As for Old Man Pei, he was already used to it. When Murong found out about his identity, he called him Old Man Pei without the slightest bit of fear. At that time, Old Man Pei already knew Murong's character. "You're Murong, right? Then I'll just call you by your name. I'm sure you already knew about my condition before you came over. You said you have a solution?" Old Man Ouyang didn't stand on ceremony and went straight to the point. Murong nodded. "I don't dare to guarantee it. I can only say that there's a possibility. Therefore, I hope Old Man Ouyang doesn't have too much hope." "Ha ha! Even Old Man Pei and the others can't diagnose it. What hope do I have? However, we still have to make a Hail Mary effort. Why don't you give it a try?" Old Man Ouyang laughed heartily. He wasn't worried about his body at all. When he heard Old Man Ouyang's laughter, Murong felt that Old Man Ouyang really didn't care about his body's condition. Murong immediately closed his eyes. Old Man Ouyang also relaxed his body and allowed Murong's spiritual will to enter his body. Old Man Pei and Ouyang Yin looked at Murong and Old Man Pei nervously. In particular, Old Man Pei stared at Murong without blinking. He was afraid that he would miss out on something. "Old Man Ouyang, other than your spiritual space, I want to check every other part of your body. Please let go." Murong suddenly said while he was checking. There was no other way. The difference in strength between the two of them was too great. Even if Old Man Ouyang didn't relax completely, Murong couldn't check his body. "Okay." Old Man Ouyang immediately agreed. He just had to protect his spiritual space. Even if Murong wanted to kill him, he couldn't do it. Moreover, as long as his soul didn't die, he could immediately recover his destroyed body. Murong carefully checked Old Man Ouyang's body. After a long time, he finally opened his eyes and heaved a sigh of relief. There was no result. Murong was quite self-aware about this. If it could be discovered with divine telekinesis, other people would have discovered it long ago. Why would they wait for him, a god? "Old Man Ouyang, I'm going to inject a bit of my power into you." After Old Man Ouyang agreed, Murong converted his power into life force. Then, it entered Old Man Ouyang's body through his hand. What kind of power is this? When the life force's aura spread out, Old Man Ouyang and Old Man Pei were shocked. Especially Old Man Ouyang. He felt that Murong's power was emitting an incomparably powerful life force. Everywhere it passed, it emitted an enormous killing intent. Every inch of muscle and bone seemed to have been reborn. When the life force passed through his arm, old man Ouyang immediately felt that there was a huge difference between his arm and the rest of his body. If the rest of his body was compared to a middle-aged man at the peak of his life, then his arm was like a newborn baby. Although it was young and tender, it had a much longer life force than a middle-aged man. Life force. Old man Pei's expression changed drastically as he cried out in surprise. His face was filled with excitement. Life force, so this is the life force. Old man Ouyang was shocked when he heard old man Pei's words. Then, a glimmer of hope rose in his heart. What was the life force? It represented the supreme rules of life. It had unfathomable and terrifying power. It had the power to heal everything. It was the power that all miracle doctors dreamed of. With the life force, it was more miracle doctor than any other miracle doctor. Some illnesses that other miracle doctors couldn't treat were nothing in front of the life force. As long as the life force brushed past, any illness would be cured. Chapter 909. Old Master, don't be agitated. Murong felt a little embarrassed when he sensed the old man's chaotic aura. Because of that, Murong life force was directly forced out of Old Master Ouyang's body. Old Master Ouyang nodded and immediately calmed down. Murong controlled the life force and began to carefully observe every inch of Old Master Ouyang's body. However, even after he checked his entire body, he didn't find anything strange. Murong immediately fell silent. If even the life force didn't find anything strange, there were only two possibilities. One was that there was nothing wrong with Old Master Ouyang's body. The other possibility was that Old Master Ouyang's illness was very strong and obscure, and even the life force couldn't detect it. Old Master Ouyang's strength had been regressing, and there must be something wrong with his body. Then there was only one possibility, and that was that the life force wasn't strong enough to detect the cause. However, Murong felt suspicious about this. With the ability of the life force, it was very sensitive to diseases and the like. No matter how strong the other party was, it could be detected. The key was that even if it was detected, it couldn't be treated. Could it be in the soul? This thought flashed through Murong's mind. Kid, how is it? Did you find anything? Seeing Murong frown, Old Man Pei immediately asked. He seemed to be more anxious than Old Master Ouyang. There's nothing suspicious about Old Master Ouyang's body. At least I didn't find anything. However, I do have some suspicions. Murong voiced his suspicions and speculations. Old Man Pei and Old Master Ouyang fell silent. In fact, they also suspected that there was something wrong with the soul. However, Old Master Ouyang didn't notice the change in his soul at all, and even Old Man Pei couldn't detect it. In addition, there were a few godly doctors that Old Master Ouyang trusted who had entered Old Master Ouyang's soul space to take a look, and they didn't find anything wrong. Old Master, if you trust me, I want to enter your soul space to take a look. Murong looked at Old Master Ouyang and said in a deep voice. His personality had always been like this, to face difficulties head-on. Murong would not give up until he found the root of the problem. Okay. Grandpa Ouyang immediately agreed without any hesitation. Murong was touched. The soul was the most important part of a person, but it was also the weakest part. Although it was said that a god wouldn't die as long as his godhead was still present, that was under the premise that his soul still existed. Once the soul was destroyed, even if you had 100 godheads in your body, you would still die. No matter who it was, he didn't allow anyone to enter his spiritual space, because it was very easy to injure one's soul. Grandpa Ouyang agreed to Murong's request without hesitation. Firstly, he believed that with Murong's strength, he would not be able to hurt him. The other reason was that he believed in Murong. Even if Murong was only a heavenly god, as long as he entered the old man's spiritual space, even if he couldn't destroy the old man's soul, he could still severely injure him. I'm going in. Muronyu took a deep breath and attached his divine thought to a wisp of life force. Then, he went straight into Grandpa Ouyang's spiritual space. Then, Muronyu saw a figure that looked exactly like Grandpa Ouyang, the old man's soul. Muronyu controlled the life force and immediately surrounded Grandpa Ouyang's soul. There was nothing strange. On the contrary, Muronyu found that Grandpa Ouyang's soul was full of vitality. This meant that Grandpa Ouyang still had a long time to live, and there was still a long way to go. Impossible. Muronyu frowned slightly and seriously felt Grandpa Ouyang's soul. He felt that there must be something wrong with Grandpa Ouyang's soul. However, he didn't find anything wrong. There must be something wrong when things are abnormal. Grandpa Ouyang's strength is constantly regressing, and his soul should be weakening at the same time. But why is it so full of vitality? Muronyu looked at Grandpa Ouyang's soul and fell into deep thought. There must be something wrong with this soul. Muronyu muttered, and a light flashed in his eyes. He finally realized what was wrong. Now, he had to find a specific reason. After checking over and over again, Muronyu's eyes flickered as a trace of killing intent burst forth from him. Grandpa Ouyang was shocked when he felt Muronyu's murderous intent. He thought that Muronyu was going to attack him. However, at this moment, Muronyu's divine thought and power quickly withdrew from Grandpa Ouyang's spiritual space and even his physical body. After discovering that Muronyu wasn't going to attack him, Grandfather Ouyang let out a sigh of relief. Otherwise, he would have killed Muronyu immediately. I think I know what happened to Grandpa Ouyang. Muronyu took a deep breath and said to Grandpa Ouyang and Old Man Pei, "What exactly happened?" Grandpa Ouyang, Old Man Pei, and Ouyang Yin all looked at Muronyu's face. There's nothing wrong with Grandpa Ouyang's body. However, Grandpa Ouyang's strength is constantly regressing. If I'm not wrong, Grandpa Ouyang's strength is deteriorating faster and faster? Grandpa Ouyang nodded and admitted it directly. Grandpa Ouyang, did you find something wrong with your soul? Are you saying that there's something wrong with his soul? That's impossible. His soul is healthier than anyone else's, Old Man Pei said in a low voice and looked at Muronyu suspiciously. Grandpa Ouyang was the same. His soul was very strong and there was nothing wrong with it. That's where the problem lies. Muronyu glanced at the two of them and paused for a moment before continuing. Deities, even heavenly venerables, have limited lifespans. You should know this better than I do. The three of them nodded and continued to look at Muronyu. They didn't know what his words had to do with Grandpa Ouyang. If I'm not wrong, Grandpa Ouyang, you're already very old. Although you're not close to the end of your lifespan is close to half of a heavenly venerate's lifespan, right? Grandpa Ouyang nodded. This wasn't a secret. I'll compare Grandpa Ouyang's lifespan to that of mortal. The limit of his lifespan is 100 years. Grandpa Ouyang's lifespan might be 60 years old. Perhaps you all know what this means? You're already an old man. Whether it's the human body or other functions, they're starting to weaken. In the end, when your lifespan reaches its limit, you'll die. Grandpa Ouyang, half of your lifespan has passed. Under normal circumstances, your soul is starting to weaken. Even if it's not obvious, it's still weakening. My soul isn't weakening. On the contrary, it seems to be stronger than before. Grandpa Ouyang's expression changed slightly. He finally knew the reason. Old Man Pei's face instantly revealed a look of surprise. He had noticed it back then, but he didn't care at all. Moreover, even if he had noticed it, he didn't know the specific reason behind it. If I'm not wrong, Grandpa Ouyang's soul is undergoing a mutation. A soul mutation. Everyone was at a loss. They didn't know what a soul mutation was. A soul mutation is actually a powerhouse whose soul has started to grow. Because of the strength of the soul, it requires a large amount of energy. Therefore, Grandpa Ouyang's physical strength is constantly being extracted. As long as you don't replenish it in time and your soul doesn't absorb enough energy, your strength will continue to decline. Once this happens, your soul will become bigger and bigger, and the speed at which it absorbs energy will also become faster. On the contrary, your strength will decline faster and faster. In the end, your physical strength will be sucked dry. Grandpa Ouyang and the other two's expressions changed slightly. However, a soul mutation also has a huge benefit. At this point, Murong paused, as if he was organizing his words. Before this, I've seen this situation in an ancient book. There are only two possibilities for a soul mutation. One is that the physical strength is sucked dry, and the mutated soul gradually withers because there's no more energy to absorb, ultimately leading to death. The other situation is that when the mutated soul reaches a certain level of strength, it can allow the soul and physical body to undergo a transformation and even become a sage in one fell swoop. It's either death or becoming a sage. However, most of the time it's death. Shock. Old Man Pei and the other two were stunned by Murong Yu's words. They were speechless for a long time. After a long time, Grandpa Ouyang asked Murong Yu, "Can a soul mutation really allow a person to become a sage?" Murong Yu nodded. However, the body and soul must be strengthened at the same time. In other words, the two must maintain a balance. Otherwise, death is certain. Moreover, according to the ancient book, there are two ways for a god to become a sage. One is to cultivate continuously like a god or an immortal. The other is to cultivate the soul. As long as the soul is strong enough, one can become a sage. Grandpa Ouyang, your soul mutation inadvertently allowed you to walk on another path to becoming a sage. It's a mixed blessing, Murong Yu added in the end. Of course, Murong Yu hadn't read any ancient books. These were all things Hichu had revealed to him. One must know that Hichu was a peak existence in the holy world when he was alive. He had a wealth of experience on how to become a sage. Of course, if Murong Yu hadn't come into contact with a soul mutation, Hichu wouldn't have revealed these things to him. After all, Murong Yu was still too weak. Knowing these things in advance might not be beneficial to him. It might even cause him to bite off more than he could chew. Becoming a sage, Grandpa Ouyang and the other two were speechless for a long time, unable to react in time. Chapter 9-10. According to the legends, sages were immortal existences. Sages were definitely powerful existences that were above all gods. However, there had never been any sages in the god realm. Perhaps sages were too powerful and could not descend to the god realm. In the god realm, there were only legends about sages being invincible. Of course, sages were not just legends. Over the countless years, there had been gods who had successfully become sages and ascended to the holy world. However, how did one ascend? How did one cultivate to become a sage? It was still a mystery in the god realm. However, Murong Yu's words pointed out that there were two ways for gods to ascend to the holy world. However, it was too vague. Seeing the three of them staring at him in a daze, Murong Yu shrugged and said helplessly, "That's all I know. As for how to become a sage, I don't know." Murong Yu really did not know because Hichu did not tell him in detail. Moreover, Hichu had revealed a piece of information. The holy world was the oldest and most advanced world among all the worlds. Although the holy world was huge, over the countless years, there were still many sages. Therefore, as the number of sages increased, there would be one more person to share the heaven-earth Yuan Qi. As a result, those sages who wanted to reach a higher realm would not be willing to do so. Therefore, since a long time ago, the holy world had started to control more people to ascend to the holy world. Although the effect was not great, it still slowed down the number of people ascending to the holy world. Of course, the number of people in the holy world was still increasing. This was uncontrollable, unless they did not allow people from the god realm to ascend or give birth to children. It was because of this that sages were not allowed to descend to the god realm without permission. They could not pass things from the holy world to the god realm, and they could not help the descendants of the god realm. Therefore, if people from the god realm wanted to ascend to the holy world, they could only rely on themselves. However, The difficulty of ascending to the holy world was countless times higher than the difficulty of becoming a god. What a pity! Old Master Ouyang and Old Man Pei sighed. Their faces were filled with regret. By the way, Murongyu, do you have any way to help me? Grandpa Ouyang sighed and asked expectantly. Although the soul mutation gave him a chance to become a sage, the chances of him becoming a sage were too small. On the other hand, the chances of him dying were extremely high. Murongyu shook his head. He did not have that ability, at least not for the time being. With his current level of life force, it was of no help at all. You mean to say that when you become stronger in the future, it will be possible? There was still a glimmer of hope in Grandpa Ouyang's heart. Murongyu nodded slightly. Murongyu was even confident that if he could reach a higher realm, not to mention treatment, he could even suppress Old Master Ouyang's mutated soul. You are now at the peak of the heavenly deity realm. How can you break through to a higher realm? If you need anything, just let me know. Ha! This kid was just a true god not long ago. How could he break through to the Master God stage so quickly? However, this brat was really strange. His speed of improvement was extremely terrifying. Perhaps it won't be long before he becomes as powerful as us, Old Man Pei said with a smile. Originally, when Murongyu heard Grandfather Ouyang's words, he wanted to ask him for some medicinal pellets or other items that contained sufficient energy. However, after hearing Old Man Pei's words, Murongyu did not continue. His speed of improvement was just too terrifying. It could be said to be shocking. If he suddenly broke through to the Master God stage now, it would be even more terrifying. If he attracted the attention of certain people, it might lead to a lot of unnecessary trouble. That's right, brat. What you had before should be the legendary life force, right? Old Man Pei asked Murongyu as his eyes shone brightly. Murongyu stared at Old Man Pei and asked in return, "What do you want?" "I'll tell you in advance that the life force can't be passed on to you. There's no cultivation method or anything like that. Of course, the life force could not be cultivated. If it were not for the Tree of Life, Murongyu would not have the life force at all." Old Man Pei smiled embarrassedly. Why had he not thought about this before? Furthermore, if the life force could be passed on or cultivated, he would even have to put down his pride and beg Murongyu. However, he knew that the life force was basically a thing of legend. It cannot be passed on or cultivated. As a result, when Murongyu said that, he only smiled embarrassedly. He was not too disappointed. Isn't your Ouyang clan's number one person in the younger generation, Ouyang Fei, having a problem with her body? If this brat is willing to help, Ouyang Fei's body will definitely be fine. Old Man Pei was speaking to Old Man Ouyang. However, Murongyu's heart skipped a beat. Ouyang Fei was Fantong's fiancée. He could not just watch anything happen to her. If it was possible, he would still help. As a result, he asked, "Old Man Ouyang, what's wrong with Ouyang Fei's body? If I can help, please don't hesitate to ask. There's something wrong with that girl's body. If that problem is not removed, the highest achievement she can achieve in this lifetime will be the primordial god realm. She will never be able to step into the heavenly venerate realm." Old Man Ouyang sighed. Murongyu narrowed his eyes slightly. Ouyang Fei was the number one person in the Ouyang clan's younger generation. Her talent was extremely monstrous. It would not be a problem for her to reach the peak of the heavenly venerate realm. However, she knew that she would never be able to step into the heavenly venerate realm. How heavy of a blow was this to her? Ouyang Fei's body met with an accident when she was young. The hidden illness has never been cured. This old man has no way to cure it, because only the life force can heal it. Old Man Pei explained from the side. The life force can heal it. Murongyu's eyes flashed. Old Man Pei nodded. How many people know about this? Does Fantong know about it? Only a limited number of people know. Fantong doesn't know either. Old Man Ouyang replied. If that's the case, Murongyu's eyes flashed. Not long after, Murongyu returned to his residence with Old Man Pei. Fantong immediately came forward and asked about Old Man Ouyang. Murong gave a rough explanation. Then, with a heavy expression, he said to Fan Tong, "Old man Ouyang is fine for now. However, there's a big problem with your woman." Fan Tong's expression instantly turned grave. What happened? Ouyang Fei's body has always been problematic. Her highest achievement is the primordial god realm. Moreover, her lifespan is only half of an ordinary primordial god's. It's not even half. Old man Pei continued. Fan Tong's expression turned even gloomier. For ordinary gods, even heavenly emperors, half of a primordial god's lifespan was already considered very long. However, for a true primordial god or even a heavenly venerate, half of a primordial god's lifespan was too short. It was meaningless. Moreover, with Ouyang Fei's aptitude, she couldn't enter the heavenly venerate realm. This was the cruelest point. Whether it was her lifespan or not being able to enter the heavenly venerate realm, Fan Tong couldn't accept it. Divine Dr. Pei, is there no other way? Fan Tong looked at Old Man Pei with a hopeful expression. I have no other way. Before Old Man Pei could finish his sentence, Fan Tong's face fell. Kid, I haven't finished speaking. Why are you in such a hurry? Old Man Pei couldn't help but feel depressed when he saw Fan Tong's expression. There's still a way. Fan Tong's face flashed with joy. Murong Yu has a way. Old Man Pei pointed at Murong Yu and rolled his eyes. Brother, you really have a way? You can definitely help me. Fan Tong rushed in front of Murong Yu and grabbed Murong Yu's hands excitedly. I have a way, but I need you to invite your woman over. Just you wait. Before Murong Yu could finish his sentence, Fan Tong had already turned into a gust of wind and disappeared in front of Murong Yu and the rest. His speed had far exceeded that of a heavenly god. This guy, Murong Yu's face had a trace of a smile. The main reason he came to the Ouyang clan was because of Fan Tong. Previously, he was still thinking of how to settle the matter between Fan Tong and Ouyang Fei. Now the opportunity had come. In reality, Fan Tong had rejected the marriage mainly because he couldn't let go of his masculine thoughts. However, he truly had feelings for Ouyang Fei. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so nervous after knowing about Ouyang Fei's condition. After this incident, Fan Tong and Ouyang Fei should be able to settle the matter. Murong Yu didn't have to wait for long. Very quickly, Fan Tong pulled a bashful Ouyang Fei and rushed in. This was the first time Murong Yu saw Ouyang Fei. In a flash, her clothes were whiter than snow, and her face was devastatingly beautiful. In terms of looks, she wasn't inferior to Zhao Jiqing at all. However, at this moment, she, who was in the immemorial god realm, was like an inexperienced young lady. Her face was filled with shyness, and she even clung to Fan Tong's side like a little bird. Seeing this scene, Murong Yu was a little puzzled. How could Fan Tong refuse to marry such a shy, timid, and docile woman? What kind of logic was this? Murong Yu finally understood why Kurlan despised Fan Tong so much. Greetings to Divine Dr. Pei. Hello, Murong Yu. After entering, Ouyang Fei bowed to Divine Dr. Pei before smiling at Murong Yu. Should I call you sister-in-law? Fan Tong isn't as strong as me, so I should call you sister-in-law, right? Fan Tong? Murong Yu smiled as he sized up Fan Tong and Ouyang Fei. Fan Tong blushed for once. Cut the crap. If you don't have a solution, you know the consequences. You can't beat me. Who's afraid of you? Murong Yu smiled faintly before looking at Ouyang Fei. Your body is a little strange. You might need some time to recover. Are you ready? Chapter 9:11. Murong Yu and Ouyang Fei sat cross-legged on the floor in a room with a restriction. Murong Yu sat cross-legged behind Ouyang Fei, his hands pressing against her back as he poured all his energy into her body. However, both of them looked a little nervous. Ouyang Fei wasn't nervous because Murong Yu was pressing against her back, but because the hidden illness in her body was about to be cured and her strength would rise to another level in the future. Murong Yu was nervous because the woman in front of him was good-for-nothing's fiancée. He wanted to cure Ouyang Fei, and he couldn't afford to lose her. That was why he was slightly nervous. Relax your whole body. I'm starting. Morong calmed down and shouted. Then he attached his divine will to the life force and slowly entered Yangfei's body through his hands. This was Morong first time entering Yangfei's body. Don't think too much. It was just his divine will and energy entering Yangfei's body. Morong was stupefied the instant his divine sense and life force entered his body, riddled with holes. Yes, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that Yangfei's body was riddled with holes. Visible wounds kept appearing in front of Morong eyes. These weren't wounds on the surface. They were similar to bad spots. The bad spots were distributed in Yangfei's body. Some were big, some were small, and they kept devouring Yangfei's body. As these bad spots kept getting stronger, they kept increasing in number. In the end, Yangfei's body would be completely devoured by these bad spots and become a huge bad spot. At that time, Yangfei's life would come to an end. Moreover, Morong estimated that Yangfei's lifespan wouldn't reach half of a primordial god's lifespan. Even if she broke through to the heavenly venerate realm, it would only increase her lifespan a little. These bad spots were constantly corroding Yangfei's body. Even a heavenly venerate powerhouse couldn't completely heal them. Even old man Pei couldn't do anything about it. In fact, these weren't illnesses, but a mutation of Yangfei's body. Perhaps it had been there since she was born. If it wasn't for his heaven-defying aptitude that allowed him to rapidly increase his strength, she would have died a long time ago. As his strength continued to increase, his valiant physique slowed down the devouring process. Morong furrowed his brows at the sight of this. Life force can easily repair these damage points, but can only treat the symptoms and not the root cause. In order to completely destroy these damage points, Yangfei's body must be destroyed, or even her physical body must be annihilated. Moreover, during this process, she had to use her life force to constantly nourish her body. Otherwise, even if she recovered her body, those flaws would not disappear. Your body is very serious. I have a way to help you recover completely, but the process might be a little awkward. After confirming the plan, Morong told Yangfei his plan. The reason why it was awkward was because if Yangfei shattered her physical body and was reborn, she would be in a very awkward situation. Would Morong be unable to avoid seeing her naked body? Body? Naked? Body. After all, how could a body that had just been reborn have the time to create clothes? Moreover, Morong had to keep an eye on everything during this process. He couldn't relax at all, or all his previous efforts would be wasted. If it were another woman, Morong might not be so embarrassed. However, this woman was Fan Tong's fiancée. If Morong saw her, whether it was Morong, Yangfei, or even Fan Tong, they would all be embarrassed. Let's treat this as a secret between us. Yangfei quickly decided. Compared to this little embarrassment, her life was more important. Morong nodded, and then an endless amount of life force began to emanate, drowning the entire room. At the same time, under Morong's signal, Yangfei's body automatically disintegrated, turning into billions of particles that floated in front of Morong. Morong's expression was solemn, and he began to control the life force to surround these billions of particles, and then began to expel the bad spots in these particles. Morong didn't destroy all the bad spots at the beginning, because his life force wasn't that strong. Therefore, he only destroyed a portion of the bad spots on the particles each time. Then, after destroying these bad spots, he moved these repaired particles to another place and used the life force to nourish them. Time continued to pass, day after day, and in a flash, a month had passed. Why hasn't she come out yet? Outside the room, Fan Tong paced back and forth, looking anxious and irritated. Good for nothing. If you continue to walk around in front of this lady, do you believe that I won't destroy you? Kurlan finally flipped out. She put her hands on her hips and glared at Fan Tong, her entire body emitting a murderous aura. Fan Tong had been walking around in front of everyone like this for almost a month. Lan Kier and the others were dizzy from the shaking. However, Fan Tong turned a blind eye to Ker Lan's murderous gaze, and he couldn't even be bothered with Ker Lan. Ker Lan was furious and ran to Ouyang Tong's side, hugging her arm with a pitiful look. Sister Ouyang, this Fan Tong is too much. Why don't you restrain him first? Okay. Ouyang Tong's personality was very fiery. In fact, if Ker Lan didn't say anything, she would be a bit annoyed. Therefore, at this time, he didn't hesitate to make a move. Suddenly, Fan Tong was entangled by a force. Instantly, Fan Tong was rooted to the spot. Ouyang Tong was a heavenly emperor powerhouse, and Fan Tong, a heavenly god, couldn't resist at all. Fan Tong opened his mouth to speak, but another wave of energy fell upon him. This time, Fan Tong's ability to speak was sealed. The world is peaceful. Old man Pei lay on a chair and took out a bottle of divine wine that he'd brewed himself, pouring himself a drink. If there was one person in this courtyard who wasn't nervous, it would be this old man. After all, he knew that the power of life could definitely heal Ouyang Fei. It's done. In the room, Murong Yu wiped the non-existent sweat from his forehead and inwardly breathed a sigh of relief. After a month, he'd finally destroyed the billions of particles that Ouyang Fei had turned into. Not only that, but Murong Yu also checked 3 times to make sure that the particles that had been destroyed no longer had any defects. Only then did he signal for Ouyang Fei to start reconstructing her body. In fact, Ouyang Fei's body hadn't been destroyed, but had been split into billions of pieces. Her body was still there, and so was her divine spark. Thus, with a single thought, her body reconstructed into a perfect naked body. Instantly, she was naked. Ouyang Fei's naked body appeared in front of Murong Yu. Murong Yu didn't look sideways. In fact, his divine will had already scanned every inch of Ouyang Fei's body. There was no helping it. This was the most crucial moment. He had to ensure that Ouyang Fei's body no longer had any defects. Ouyang Fei didn't argue and sat down cross-legged, beginning to recover her strength. During this process, Murong Yu's power of life and divine will carefully observed Ouyang Fei's body. After half a day, he finally let out a sigh of relief. Ouyang Fei's body was fine. In the future, without the interference of these defects, her achievements would no longer be limited to the primordial god realm. However, Murong Yu's brows were slightly wrinkled, because he discovered that even though Ouyang Fei's body was perfectly fine, there was no way to recover the lost lifespan. It was still only half of a primordial god's lifespan, or even less. Even if she broke through to the Empyrean realm, her lifespan would still be far inferior to that of an ordinary Empyrean. Murong Yu looked at Ouyang Fei, who'd already put on her clothes, and muttered to himself, "Your lifespan has been greatly depleted. How about this? I'll continue to help you repair your body and increase your lifespan as much as possible." Murong Yu pondered for a moment and said, "The power of life could repair everything in life and fill life with power of life. To a certain extent, it was equivalent to increasing one's lifespan." All right, Ouyang Fei didn't argue and immediately agreed. In the following time, Murong Yu began to use the power of life to continuously cleanse Ouyang Fei's body and even her soul. The power of life didn't disappoint Murong Yu. After a full month, Murong Yu finally stopped. At this moment, Ouyang Fei's face was glowing, and her entire body was brimming with vitality. Although it can't restore your lifespan to that of a primordial god, it's still increased to 80%. In the future, when I'm stronger, I should be able to restore your lifespan to its normal state. Looking at Ouyang Fei, Murong Yu's face was full of smiles, and he was very satisfied. However, Murong Yu also knew of a flaw of the power of life. The power of life could indeed increase one's lifespan, but it could only greatly increase the amount of lifespan that had been depleted, and it couldn't increase the amount of lifespan. For example, if an Empyrean could only live for 10 epochs, the power of life could increase the lifespan of that Empyrean by 10,000 years or even 100,000 years, but it definitely wouldn't be by much. Only in a situation like Ouyang Fei's could it greatly increase one's lifespan. Moronyu, thank you. I, Ouyang Fei, will never forget the kindness you've shown me. Ouyang Fei immediately thanked Moronyu from the bottom of her heart. She didn't mention how she would repay him, because some things couldn't be said with words. With Ouyang Fei's personality, she definitely wouldn't forget this kindness. Moreover, Fantong wouldn't forget this kindness either. You're Fantong's woman, and Fantong is my brother. Saving you is a must. You don't have to take it to heart. Moronyu said with a smile. No matter what, I won't forget this kindness. I won't forget this kindness. Ouyang Fei emphasized once more, and then withdrew her realm and left the room. Moronyu only shook his head, feeling somewhat helpless. However, he didn't say anything else. With Ouyang Fei's personality, no matter what he said, she wouldn't change her mind. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.